June 21st, 2017 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman. Udaly.
Here.
Fritz. Wheeler.
Here. Statement I usually read, I think most people have heard it multiple times. The bottom line is this: when it's your turn to testify, just state your name for the record. We don't need your address. Typically, you get 3 minutes to testify. The lights will sort you out on that front. If you're a lobbyist, you must say so. And if you're here representing an organization, we'd like to know that as well. Disruptions are not tolerated. Any disruptions to people trying to provide their testimony or the council trying to provide deliberation, we'll call it out. And if you don't stop the disruption, you'll be asked to leave. If you're asked to leave and you don't leave, you're subject to arrest for trespassing. Just so we're all very clear on that. We prefer not to have applause, and certainly we prefer not to have people booing or anything like that. Just a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. It's a respectful, good thing to do. Bottom line, we want everybody to feel safe, welcomed, respected, and heard in this chamber. With that, we are going to call item 7. Oh, thank you. I almost forgot. We have some very distinguished guests here today. We have the Oregon Summer Fellows here from the Hatfield School of Government. Could you raise your hands, the Summer Fellows from the Hatfield School of Government? And Phil Kiesling is here. And Phil, could you raise your hand? We're proud to have you here representing the leadership. He's hiding behind the large novelty clock.
Security, would you have your remote, please?
Very good. Well, thank you and welcome. And we hope we'll provide you a highly informative and entertaining session this afternoon. So with that, Carla, could you please call item 731?
714.
731, please, first.
Sorry. 731, authorize contracts with for information technology on-call services not to exceed $5,500,000.
Good afternoon, Christine.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Christine Moody, Procurement Services. You have before you an ordinance recommending the authorization of on-call services contracts for the Bureau of Technology Services in the categories of project management, quality assurance, and information technologies planning, business analysis, professional development, and process facilitation. On January 10th, 2017, a request for proposals was issued, and on February 7th, a total of 48 proposals were received. There were 19 firms submitting proposals, of which 9 were certified disadvantaged minority, women, or emerging small businesses. Each proposal was reviewed, evaluated, and scored by an evaluation committee. Each committee included 1 minority evaluator. 8 contracts are being awarded to certified DMWESB firms for a total contract value of $3.2 million, which is 58.2% of the total, apportioned as follows: minority businesses, $2,650,000; women-owned businesses, $550,000. I will turn this back over to council if you have any questions.
So you have these broken down by different service categories and not to exceed values. Is there anything you can tell us with regard to the MWESB participation in those categories? Are there some categories where it is harder for us to find qualified MWESB contractors or subcontractors?
So in the 3, Mayor, in the 3 categories for project management, 3 of the 5 contracts are being awarded to certified firms. In quality assurance, 3 out of the 5 contracts are being awarded to certified firms. And in information technologies, 2 out of the 4 contracts are being awarded to certified firms.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Colleagues, any further questions?
Ms. Moody, is this your last appearance before us as Chief Procurement Officer?
Yes, it is.
And
hopefully my last appearance in front of you.
I'm sure you're going to do a wonderful job for the protocol, and just wanted to thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you, Commissioner.
We will miss you.
Thank you.
Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Fish?
Let me add my voice to my colleagues, what they've said previously. Christine, thank you for your service. We had a chance to visit yesterday and went over some work that's still in progress, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you over these many years, and I don't think people fully appreciate what a challenging job you have. And in some ways, I think the way you present reminds me a little bit of Andrew Abbey, which is you do your job so well that the public often doesn't understand how much time and work and other things go on behind the scenes. And we're very grateful for your service. We will never forgive the port for this action. But thank you very much, and I'm pleased to support this. Aye.
Udaly?
Thank you, and good luck on your new adventure. Aye.
Fritz?
Well, you're always clear, concise, and have answers to my questions, whether I've asked them ahead of time or not. So I really appreciate all your work, and you have moved the ball on engagement of women and minorities in getting the money that the city gives out or puts out in contracts like this one. And I'm always confident that when you bring something to us, that it has been scoped out and done properly. So thank you. Aye.
Wheeler?
Well, I certainly want to thank you, Christine, for your very dedicated service to the city. And I did not get to work with you for long, but in the short time period that we've had together, I feel that you've always been extremely detailed in your answers, well prepared for the council sessions, forthright, and effective. And so the port's gain is most certainly our loss, and we wish you the very best of luck. And I'm with Commissioner Fish. We'll find all means of revenge
Well,
to,
thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
to
It has
repay
been a
this travesty.
pleasure for me. It has been a real pleasure working here. I have learned a lot, and this is just a good opportunity for me. So I thank you very much.
It is a great opportunity. We all wish you the very best of luck. Thank you. Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Next item, 730, please.
Authorize a 5-year use and occupancy agreement with Atlantic Aviation for hangar space at Portland International Airport through January 31st, 2021 for Police Air Support Unit.
All right, come on up. And legal counsel, I had an open question from my team this morning as to whether or not we need to use the script, or given that we've already had a session on this, whether we just have a presentation to update us on any changes.
So I believe the item Carla just read is actually 730, which is not the land
I'm
use
sorry,
hearing.
that is correct. This
But
is
when we-
just the ordinance,
So
sorry.
you get to the land use
You're
hearing.
right,
okay.
this is what happens when I don't sleep 4 days in a row.
I'm sorry.
And who do we have here to present this?
Are we on 730? Is that the one we're doing?
730.
The item you called was 730.
Right.
We can do that, or we can,
Let's do 730 and get it done.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's pretty straightforward.
okay. And then move on to the land use hearing.
Okay, very good. Is there somebody here to make a presentation on item 730?
They may be thinking these are coming up after the time certain, the way the agenda is set up.
Ah, very good. Okay, so we'll go to the 728 then.
And then to answer, well, let Carla call.
728, appeal of Landon Kroll against Design Commission's decision of denial for design review of a new 5 to 6-story, approximately 70-foot tall, 17-unit apartment building in the Central East Side Subdistrict of the Central City Plan District at 1122 Southeast Ankeny Street, LU 16184 DZM.
Okay, now back to my original question.
Yes. So, no, we do not need to run through the whole script. We can start with just a reminder of where we're at.
Okay, so this is an open record.
So we should reopen the record, continue the hearing.
We're continuing the hearing, we're opening the record, and there was some discussion at the end of the last session about the appellant meeting with the neighborhood, and my understanding was that Commissioner Fish had been engaged in brokering a Resolutions Northwest discussion. And so I believe we were going to hear about the results of that discussion. if that is the wish of my colleagues.
I think it's going to go to Commissioner Daly.
Commissioner Udaly?
No?
No?
All right, is there anybody who would like to tell the city council where we are with the appeal?
Yeah.
Come on
Yes.
up.
Yes.
Very good. I'm happy to take my vote.
Council, if I could suggest, it might be good to allow BDS staff to just provide a brief update and a status update, and then they can put some information in
Isn't
the
that what I
record.
just asked for?
Yes, sorry, but
Yeah.
the attorney was,
Great,
I'd like to start with staff. Yeah.
come on up.
Tim Herron, Bureau of Development Services.
Good afternoon.
Grace Jeffries, Bureau of Development Services as well. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
And you're going to walk us through this afternoon's hearing?
I am going to give you a brief update of what has happened since the first and second hearing, and
Perfect.
a very brief kind of review of the case.
Excellent, thank you.
So, quick overview. I'm going to show you a quick recap of the context, show you the quick recap of the proposal, the process where we are to date, the decision, and the appeal. So if you remember, the site's located in the Central City Plan District and the Central East Side Subdistrict. It's shown there in pink on the diagram. It's located at the far eastern edge of the subdistrict. Because the site lies within these district boundaries, the approval criteria for design review are the Central City Fundamental Design Guidelines and the special design guidelines for the design zone of the Central East Side District. This aerial image shows the change in texture and density of the nearby built environment from the dense commercial and industrial Central East Side area shown on the left and the commercial area along Sandy above to the less densely built residential neighborhoods shown to the right, which Design Guideline C3-2 respect adjacent residential neighborhoods specifically refers to. Here's the site. It's comprised of two mid-block lots with abutting rear lot lines. Western lot on the left fronts Southeast Ankeny to the north, contains a 1.5-story house that's proposed to be demolished, shown in red. The eastern lot on the right fronts Southeast 12th Avenue and currently sits vacant. Shown in orange are the adjacent existing houses. The site wraps two lots to the north not owned by the applicant. Both contains houses constructed in 1904, and the remaining three lots south of the site contain houses constructed in 1894 and 1895 in the Queen Anne vernacular style. All have been identified as having potential historic and architectural significance, and the three to the south are listed on the City of Portland's Historic Resource Inventory, the HRI. And here's an image of the entire southeast 12th frontage, with the three Queen Anne houses to the left, the site in the middle outlined in red, and two early 20th century houses to the right. So in terms of zoning context, the site zoned EXD, which is central employment with a design overlay showed in red above. Maximum allowances in the EXD zone are as follows. The FAR base allowance is 3-to-1, with a additional 3-to-1 residential bonus allowance available. Height base allowance is 50 feet max, with an additional general bonus allowance of 45 feet maximum. Across the street are the CS and CG zones, shown in yellow. Maximum FAR allowances are 3-to-1, and maximum height allowance is 45 feet. There's not a design overlay on that side of the street. The program's a 6-story mixed-use building with 17 market rate units, ground floor retail unit on Ankeny, with no parking or loading. The proposed height was approximately 78 feet, and the FAR was 4.93-to-1. These are the two street elevations of the proposal. Southeast Ankeny Street elevation is at the top, with the adjacent 1.5-story house shown on the left, and adjacent 1-story commercial structure to the right. The Southeast 12th Avenue elevation is below, with adjacent residential structures shown either side. So with regards to the process, there was a pre-application conference held on April 7th, 2016. The Type 3 design reviews was submitted on June 7th, 2016. It was deemed complete on August 5th, 2016. There were first through fifth design review hearings were held October 6th, 2016 through February 2nd, 2017. And the decision was rendered. An appeal of the decision was received March 2nd, 2017. So at the first city council hearing, it was held on April 12th. The council asked the applicant to have two meetings, one with the neighborhood association and one with the adjacent neighbors. The neighborhood association meeting was held on April 20th, 2017. The majority of the attendees encouraged the applicant to consider reducing the height and the massing of the proposal. Second city council hearing was held May 11th, 2017. The hearing was continued to allow the second meeting that had been requested. So the meeting with the adjacent neighbors was then held on May 11th, 2017. Neighbors on both sides of the proposal attended. All encouraged the applicant to consider reducing the height and adding setbacks of at least 4 feet from their properties, from the property lines. So here we are at the third city council hearing, on June 21st. This is just a quick diagram showing the evolution of the design from the first, second, and third design review hearings. No images are provided from the fourth and fifth hearings as the applicant did not submit further revisions after the third hearing. And the Design Commission found that the applicable approval criteria were not yet met, therefore the request was denied. As directed in the City of Portland's Planning and Zoning Code, a design review application will be approved if the review body finds the applicant to have shown that the proposal complies with the design guidelines for the area. So the following guidelines related to contextual response, coherency, and permanence and quality were found not to be met. A4, A5, C2, C31, C32, C4, and C5. So the decision of denial is being appealed. That's why we're here. So today, the City Council has alternatives. The first would be to deny the appeal and uphold the Design Commission's decision to deny the proposal. This needs a minimum of 3 votes and means a return date to take the final vote and adopt findings. Second option would be to grant the appeal today, overturn the Design Commission's decision to deny the proposal, thereby approving the proposal. This needs a minimum of 3 votes as well and means a return date to take final vote and adopt the findings. This requires that the applicant has submitted at the hearing a full set of drawings that illustrate how the proposal meets the design guidelines so that written findings can be made and the building permit submissions can be fully evaluated for compliance with the design review approval. Third option would be to continue the hearing and request design revisions to be reviewed at a return council hearing. This needs at least 1 return date to review drawings and then another return date to take final vote and adopt findings. This option may require a waiver of the 120-day clock, as the 120-day review period for this case expires on August 5th, 2017.
So I have a question.
I was just, thank you.
Commissioner Fish and then Commissioner Fritz.
So my understanding is that the applicant, in conversations with the neighbors, has agreed to make some changes, but we don't have a set of plans in front of us that reflect those changes.
That is correct. So the case record was closed on June 8th. On June 9th, the applicant submitted revised findings with a sketch diagram showing what they were thinking of doing, which was some setbacks and a height reduction. However, the record was closed at that time. You've opened the record back up, so that will be put into the...
So we are reopening the record, which
so that
means
should be-
you can provide new information.
Yes.
But to be clear, if we receive new materials, then we have to hear from staff and the parties who want to respond to the new materials. And that is my understanding in terms of what you are now doing.
So that may
That would-
explain why we've set aside an hour and a half for this hearing. So
Correct.
So now that we've reopened the record, can you walk us through what changes the applicant has proposed to make to address the neighbors' concerns? Or do we have to ask the applicant that?
It was sent after the record was closed. As I understand it, it's a 4-foot setback on the south side and a 1.5-foot setback on the north side, and a couple of feet reduction in the parapet height of the building. And that's, no drawings have been submitted to BDS, so BDS really can't
Right.
comment on
I understand, I'm
findings.
not asking you to comment.
Yeah.
I'm just asking you to walk us through it. And I understand there's also been have they proposed to change the materials?
That's correct. I heard, but I have not seen anything that they've proposed to change the cladding, the metal cladding on the sidewalls to some type of wood cladding.
So therefore, let me ask you a procedural question. You gave us 3 options. Can we go back to that slide for a second? Do you mind?
Not at all.
It should be up.
That
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, we can deny the appeal. I understand that. We can grant the appeal contingent on the applicant submitting a full set of drawings and those drawings being reviewed by staff?
And council and findings being made that show that they meet the guidelines.
Okay, so I guess what would be helpful for me is, what is the difference between options 2 and 3 on this chart? What's the practical difference between granting the appeal with these conditions or continuing the hearing for the purpose of a further review of the revised proposal? What's the difference?
Actually, when you point that out, they're kind of one and the same in this case, because we don't have a set of drawings. So we would have to return to look at drawings anyway, because no drawings were
Right.
submitted, no
So
changes.
one difference from your chart is that we may bump up against the 120-day clock, so that would require an agreement to extend that.
And they both would, at that, as you pointed out, they're actually one and the same. So yes, either way, we're going to bump up against that clock because there are no.
So under either
Information.
circumstance, staff, there would have to be plans submitted, they'd be reviewed by staff, and then we'd have a subsequent date to discuss whether they were sufficient to reach findings that we can adopt. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Thank you you summed that up well.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Commissioner Fisher. That made it very clear. If the applicant doesn't agree to extend the clock, then our choices are fairly stark, because if we don't make a decision before August 5th, then it's deemed approved. Is that correct?
Yes, they could go and obtain approval by going to circuit court if we don't make a decision consistent with the timelines required by statute.
Right. So I guess I would like to hear from the applicant and neighbours what's being proposed. What do people think about what's being proposed? What was the result of the neighbourhood meeting? Because I can't really make a decision based on the options right now of what I know about the proposal at this point.
Okay.
Very good. So we have now heard from the BDS staff. Do we want to hear from the appellant next? And legal counsel, question for you. During the first iteration of this hearing, we had supporters. We had a time certain for the appellant. We had time certain for the rebuttal to the appellant. We then had a group of individuals supporting the appellant and a group of individuals not supporting the appellant.
Yeah.
Tell me about this second phase, what's required.
So that pattern is not required in the second phase. I would recommend that you maintain a time frame, then everybody has the same time frame that testifies, and that they speak to new evidence to the extent possible. So that the time frame is consistent for anybody that testifies. I don't think you need to require them in any
And
specific
is that
order.
true of the appellant and the rebuttal, or no?
10 minutes.
What's that?
Is it true of the appellant and the rebuttal, or just for public testimony in support or opposition?
I think there is nothing that's specified in code in terms of this practice.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
So
So
we'll,
let's,
Yes.
I'm one step ahead of you. They
Okay.
say they need 10 minutes.
Yes,
So
and
let's
then
make it 10
and I would give
minutes.
10 minutes to the appellant as well.
Good.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
We're making
And
progress.
We
There
are
we go.
making progress, and we're going to get more of these at the city council, so at some point, we need to codify a
We'll be
process
breaking for
here.
dinner and getting all your orders, and then we'll come back.
That's right.
Later, but
That's right, it's
10
Taco
minutes.
Tuesday. All right, go for it. 10 minutes, please.
Right, thank you.
Names for the record.
For the record, representing the applicant, Tim Ramus, and my office is at 2 Centerpoint Drive, Lake Oswego. I am here today with Bob Zimmerman from our architectural side of our team, and I am happy to report that we are here to present to you a compromise amended design. And that design is the product of a continuing conversation that took place after your last hearing and has proceeded for some weeks. The product of that has been some changes to the design. While I'm sure we'll find at the hearing whether we all agree to this or not, it is supported by the applicant, and it's supported by the property owners to the south, Mary Roberts and Michael Beglin, who you will recall were opponents to this application in the earlier proceeding. We have, with them, entered into a formal settlement agreement, which refers to the design you're going to hear, as well as some other issues. We, of course, recognize that that agreement is dependent wholly on whether or not the City Council agrees with the design that we're going to present today. We very much appreciate the additional time that the council granted all of us to continue the conversation. And in particular, I also want to thank you for the encouragement that you gave to all the parties to work towards some sort of resolution of the issues rather than to all face the risks of what the consequences of continuing disagreement might be. I think that was very helpful to all of us. I'd like to express thanks to Grace Jeffries for organizing the mediation, to Clark Worth, who was very professional in conducting the mediation, and also to our neighbors who gave very willingly of a great deal of their time, both in the mediation and in the many conversations and exchanges of documents and ideas that followed it. So a great deal of time's been spent on that, and we very much appreciate it. Our plan is to first identify the issues as they were discussed at the first hearing, talk about the responses of the design to those, and then let our architect present those to you in more detail. The key issues, as you recall, were the massing of the building along 12th, which included questions of height and setback, the preservation of a residential streetscape, which has historically existed along 12th, and then the question of materials, where it was vividly pointed out to us that these homes there are made of wood, they're not made of metal and stucco as our design was. Our key responses have been to reduce the building width from almost 30 feet to about 24.5 feet in order to accommodate some setbacks. Our goal here was to recognize the historic spacing between structures on the street, which was roughly from 6 to 8 feet, and we've accomplished that.
So excuse me for just 1 second, and if
Yes.
you could stop the clock. Do you have a diagram of this?
We have submitted
would
that,
be easier
and
for
we
me
will
to,
show some additional drawings today, yes.
because it would be easier for me to have it in front of me if
Yes, I think
possible while
probably,
you talk.
screen now?
It's quite small on our monitor.
oh, we have some handouts, so you can
Thank
see
you,
it.
that would be very
Yes.
helpful. It's just easier to reference when you're saying what
Yes,
you're saying.
I'm-
We can have a look.
Also work in the same way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's much better, thank you,
Oh, much.
in terms of the size that I can see.
So you will see a redesign of the first floor that we'll talk about in more detail, but the building also includes setbacks, a reduced height along 12th, and in addition, we've shifted the lobby to Ankeny so that the 12th Street frontage is simply a single door accessing an apartment, so it's quite similar to all the other frontages of buildings along that street. And at the lower level, the cladding has been changed to wood to reflect the prevalence of wood in the structures along the street there. The net effect is that we are able to preserve this as a net zero building although we are losing, I believe, 2 units of housing in making these changes because the building is slightly smaller.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
On the diagram on page 2, the 12th Avenue perspective, June 21st, is everything that's depicted in brown, that is wood clad,
Correct.
is that correct?
That is
Right.
correct.
Okay, very good, thank you, that's helpful.
And with that, Mr. Zimmerman, please proceed.
Sure. So Grace has actually given a pretty good overview of the basic changes that we initially looked at trying to shift some of the mass from the 12th Avenue side over onto the Ankeny side. And after a couple of studies, realized that from both a cost and where we were up against the fire code, it was simply impractical to do this. So this is really a reductive exercise that we've gone through. So on the south side, coming out of the meetings, both with the neighborhood as well as meetings with the neighbors, the south face of the building has been pushed up 4 feet. And, you know, one of those cases where you get lemons and you try and make lemonade, we are now using this as a fire exit, which enabled us really to push the lobby around to the other side. And so at street level, this really acts like a single-family residence where there's a single door and it goes into a single unit. So at the street level, it will operate quite similarly to the adjacent residences. On the north side, the building's been pushed back 1.5 feet, so there's a little over 7 feet between that and the adjacent building. And so we've essentially maintained the rhythm that there is across, quite frankly, most of Portland for these vintage homes of that kind of minimum shared setback that each residence gives to one another.
So could you just give me, on each side, what's the setback?
Sure. The setback on the south side is 4 feet, and on the north side, it is 1.5 feet.
And what about the east and the west?
There is no setback on the east or the west. There's no change from Design Review 3, nor were there any concerns with those setbacks
Thank you.
that were raised. So at the facilitated meeting, one of the issues that was identified that we were unaware of was that on the house to the south that Grace mentioned that was built in the late 1800s, the concrete wasn't as good back that time, so there was more concern about our construction practices. So we have jointly agreed to get recommendations from a structural engineer and have agreed, in principle, to change the foundation system from a vibrated ground improvement system to something that would be auger cast and much friendlier to the adjacent buildings. So then going to the second page, this shows the perspective from the 12th Street side. On the left was the submission for Design Review 3, and on the right are the changes. So the space between the existing house to the south and the building is increased from 4 feet to 8 feet, which has enabled us to put some windows into that elevation. We were actually able to go over with the neighbor and document the location of their windows and actually coordinate, because everybody has the same common interest. You want natural light into your spaces, but you'd also like to maintain privacy. So that actually worked out well for everyone.
And is that space consistent then between the other houses? You've got 8 feet of space now. What's on the other side of that?
I believe it's 7 feet. Our surveyors didn't get onto that
Okay,
property.
so your attempt here, though, is to be consistent in terms of the spacing.
Correct.
Okay, and it looks like you, okay, I got it. Good, thank you.
I mean, what we're trying to do there is recognize that historically it was about 6 to 8 feet of separation, and so we're trying to fall within that, 7 or 8 feet.
You know, I realize that design is a very subjective thing, and design by committee is probably a challenging thing, but for what it's worth, looking at page 2 of your thing, I think the reimagined building on the right is an improvement from my perspective, and the fact that it does seem more contextual. I love the fact you're using wood, And frankly, it's a little less Gary-esh on the left, from the left. It seems more integrated in the way that you've done the design. And frankly, I love the windows on the side, creating a more uniform look in terms of the building. So I congratulate you on this one.
Thank you.
To me, it
We're
seems like a real improvement.
pleased to
We'll
have
hear from
gotten to
everyone
this
else,
point.
but it does seem much better.
Okay, and then going to the Ankeny side, here the massing itself has changed very little, but you can see at the street level that there's more glass which reflects the switch of the lobby to that side, and then the wood wraps around, and we've essentially removed all of the stucco from the building. So as Tim mentioned, we've reduced it by 2 units and about 1,000 square feet of rentable area. And we've gone down about 20 PV panels, which is kind of right at the practical edge of being able to meet the net zero.
So how many feet are there in the planter strip that's shown with trees in it going back towards the stairs?
All right, can you repeat that? I'm looking at the plan now, so.
So the one that's, I don't know which way is north, south, east, or west, but the one that's...
North is up.
North is up, so on the west side. That planter strip which is shown with trees in it, how wide is that? On the right side of the red car.
Okay, I was looking at a floor plan and you're looking at a perspective, sorry.
Well, what,
She's looking at the elevation with the red Suzuki.
Right, so there was a discussion with the neighbor, essentially actually on their property, and now let's go to the floor plan on the first page. So we have shown a 3-foot wide, or probably will in the end be 4 feet wide, which actually works well. If you look, there's an existing curb cut on the north side off of Ankeny that goes into a parking area. And so along that west edge, it's not very practical to use it anyway, so it was quite easy to add a planter strip that essentially would provide visual screening to the kind of mass of that building that would be fairly visible as you come down Ankeny Street.
so my question is, how wide is that planter strip, please?
It's drawn as 4 feet.
So in fact, it's probably going to be quite challenging to put trees in it.
Actually, I think with a columnar beach, that actually we wouldn't have that much trouble, but
Okay.
And you said you'd reached an agreement with 2 parties,
Yes.
and which 2 parties are they on this?
They are
map
the
chart?
occupants of the home immediately to the south. They are Roberts and Beglin. And their representative is here to testify today.
So you have a legally binding settlement with them?
We do.
And so, Mr. Ramus, let me ask you, what practically is the difference? We have 3 options before us. I think we all understand what option 1 means for purposes of this proceeding. What is the practical difference in your judgment between options 2 and 3? Granting the appeal subject to getting plans and those being reviewed and continuing the hearing.
It seems to me that what we've attempted to do is get us into the ability to take option 2, which is to get a decision and get your direction to draft findings that support that decision. To that end, we have submitted drawings to the staff yesterday, a more complete set than you see here. And second, we've submitted a complete set of findings on each and every one of the criteria. So we're in good shape, I think, to develop a set of findings to support a decision should you favor this particular design option.
Okay.
Don't think a continuance is necessary from our point of view,
Okay.
other than for the adoption of findings.
One of the concerns from the Design Commission was the open stairwells with no privacy for the neighbours in their backyard. I'm curious as to there's no change in that element.
I'll let
So we
Bob address
explored
that.
enclosing the stairs, which was something that needed to be done when we shifted some of the area from the 12th Avenue side to the Ankeny side. It triggers an additional fire requirement that the stairs be enclosed. So the enclosure of the stairs, though, creates additional mass and reduces floor area. So that was actually part of why that exercise ultimately came to be not financially reasonable to do or impractical. So the stairs are still open.
Yeah, they don't seem to have been changed at all, but that was
Correct.
called out by the design commission as one of the reasons why it didn't meet the approval criteria.
With some of the commissioners, that was true.
But they unanimously denied the application.
All for
right?
different reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Amos, let me come back to another question. So this case is unique, at least during my service, because the design review process apparently left no one satisfied. And it comes to us for a decision. And it was our judgment that there should be a further process with the community, knowing that that might result in a deal that still doesn't go back to design review. And so help me with the policy question, because assuming council supported some deal here, assuming, and I have no way of knowing one way or another, are we, through this process, in effect, creating a precedent where someone can refuse to work with design review, with the design commission, come to us, opt out, in effect, create a separate process through a community negotiation, and then have the council make the findings? And is that good policy?
Well, I wouldn't think it was good policy if somebody actually did that.
No, I should have said, I offer this as a hypothetical.
I think the chances of someone making that work are limited because it will be obvious, I think, if someone did that. The record in this case shows, of course, an applicant that made continuous changes in the application and finally received a staff recommendation that was favorable based on a report that found that each and every one of the criteria were satisfied, and then decided to stand on that design and appeal that design here. So it's a different case than someone who simply fails to cooperate. It seems to me what you're raising is a possibility in any land use case in Oregon. We have a system that's essentially in two steps, where we typically have hearings officers or planning commissions decide the first step with an appeal to the electeds. And in any case, applicants could, I suppose, choose to be uncooperative. In my experience, which representing clients goes back close to 40 years now, most people that I've talked to don't want to take that risk.
So I'm going to try and put it just in plain English for me. So the insurance policy that the public interest is being met here ultimately lies with us. If we have said and sanctioned, if we have sanctioned a community mediation process to see if a deal can be worked out, we still have to be satisfied that that deal is in the public interest. But the fact is, as the reviewing body, we have the discretion to call this however we want.
I would agree with that and add to it that whether the uncooperative party at the first hearing is an opponent or an applicant, they can't change the criteria.
Right.
So the case is decided by the appellate body, in this case the council, under criteria which are exactly the same. So those can't get manipulated.
Okay. Thank you.
And with the 1.5-foot setback to the north, are you confident that you can physically develop the building without going on the neighbor's property?
We've discussed that with our contractor, and we think we can make that work.
And is the neighbor to the north part of the settlement agreement?
Not at this point. We have certainly made clear that we would be happy to enter into an agreement with them. At this point, we don't have that.
Okay.
All right, so in our view, the options are, one, to deny the appeal, which that has the consequences we talked about previously of probably creating a new application next year under more intense criteria. Second, you could, I suppose, approve the original design that we came with based upon the findings of the staff previously, or third, approve this design based upon the findings we have submitted and the drawings we've submitted already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So that was about 8 minutes. And so who would like to speak as the primary opponent? Name for the record. And they took a little less than 8 minutes, so we'll afford you 8 minutes.
Well, if nobody else will oppose it, I will.
Well, if
My
you-
name
if
is
you-
William Phillips. I live, if you'll put that deal back up, I'm the house directly to the north of the building and directly to the east of the building. In other words, I'm in the middle, right here. He's not giving, the plans, they said, okay, he wants to give us a 1.5 foot setback. We have not agreed to any of that. There is no setback on the other section of building for to our backyard. How are they going to propose to build that without damaging our yard? We've also heard nothing about compensations for any damages possible to our properties. And as far as talking to us about permissions or anything like that, Mr. Crowell has not done any of this, neither has his people, even though they say they have. We haven't been contacted. We didn't even know about these windows on the south side. All we knew is they were planning to give the south side a 4-foot setback and 1.5 foot for our side. We don't agree with this. And I don't see how they're going to build that building without disturbing our properties and making damages, and they think they don't have to make any compensations for this. I don't agree with this. That is not right for us.
Sir, were you given an opportunity to participate in the
Yes, we
in the
did.
mediation?
And we tried to talk to him and about...
No, in the mediation.
In the mediation, yes, we
And
did,
did
sir.
you attend any of the mediation
Yes, we did.
sessions?
We were there for
So you
that.
were a participant?
Yes, we were.
And did you not feel that your voice was heard through that process?
No, we did not feel our voices were heard. It seemed like the only voices they wanted to hear are the ones that were represented by a lawyer. I'm sorry, we can't afford a lawyer. We don't have one, so we try to tell them ourselves how we're feeling. But the main thing is, they're saying they approached us and talked to us about doing some of these things. The most we got from Mr. Crowell is when he came over to our front gate and dropped us off this re-proposal and stuff. And as far as talking to us about if we'd agree to this setback and not put anything in, I mean, if they're making changes, why aren't we included in any of the conversation on the changes?
So, sir,
We weren't.
And I'm sorry if you did not feel heard in that process, and we have to sort through a lot of things this afternoon. Are you aware that under the comprehensive plan, if this was turned down, a future design could be, as the lawyer said, more intense, meaning a bigger, more dense development?
Yes, I do. I do. And I still say that the building as is does not meet the requirements, as your team of building commissioners here have been saying. It doesn't meet the requirements anyway. Even in this new proposal, it does not meet the requirements. It's got too much bulk. It's not giving the right setbacks. There's all kinds of things that are wrong with it, and how they go past your commission when your commission is supposed to be weeding these out and showing that, no, it doesn't fit the criteria. Like the gentleman over here said, none of us are supposed to be able to change that criteria. It's supposed to meet that criteria because that's the way the law of building was set up. Why are they getting around it?
Well, I think one answer is that the code allows them to come to council, and we have the right to make a de novo decision. I mean, agree or disagree with that policy, I have some qualms about it myself. So let me ask you this, sir. You've raised concerns about the possibility of damage to your property. There's a lot of cranes all over the city right now and a lot of stuff going on. And, you know, we have a legal system that says if there's a damage, then the wrongdoer has to compensate you. Do you have a different view of how to anticipate a potential damage to your property?
Oh, well, if they're going to be building on there, they're going to have to cut in and they're going to cut back, you know, to get the walls set up and everything like that. How far in are they going to cut? Are they going to knock down our fence when they cut in? You know, they want to come right up to the property line. Our fence is right close to that. If they damage that and knock it over, we're not going to have our fence. All we're going to have is a wall. I mean, do you want to look at a blank wall when you get out in your backyard for a nice barbecue or something? We like having the sunlight. We just ate raspberries out of our backyard. With this proposal, we won't have the sunlight to grow raspberries in our backyard. Our strawberries will die. Most of our roses will probably wither away because they won't have the sunlight. I mean, we've been working for the last few years just to give ourselves a little space so that we could live reasonably. This proposal will destroy what we have.
Thank you.
That's about all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
I have another question.
Commissioner Fritz has a question for
Sir?
you, sir. Sir?
Sorry, I have another
Commissioner Fritz
question.
had a question.
I know that you've been through all of the design hearings and such. Can you tell me more about what the concerns of the design commissioners were, particularly with respect to your property?
Can you say that again?
Sorry. Can you tell me any more about what the design commission focused on in respect for your property? What were some of the things that they were most worried about?
What were they most worried about? Didn't seem like, it's mostly the bulk and coming right into the property and the possibility of damages to our property and the existing, they are very old homes, yes. So, you know, they've been there a long time. The vibration, even from the buildings that they've put up across the street, are shaking our house. So the damages, the setbacks, just having to look at a blank wall, we look out our windows, okay, the neighbors to the south, they've worked with them for the new windows on the south side, right? They didn't talk to us about windows on the north side or getting the setback right and, you know, doing something more. That was never, we were never even involved in any kind of discussion for this. And I don't think that that's right. And I know they still had a while to talk to the planning commission to get before this hearing and everything else. But why were we left out of the loop on that? Why weren't we being considered a little bit more we're going to be more invaded than the south side. I mean, look at it. It's wrapping around our house. Mm-hmm. It's not just next to it. So and not giving a setback on the inside of the other building so that it can be done in a way to where it'll look nicer inside. That wasn't discussed.
So what I'm hearing is that you would have liked to see something similar to what was worked out with the other neighbor, setbacks and windows and more consideration for how to match your house.
Yes.
Thank you.
Not only our house, but the house to our north, which is owned by a doctor. I don't know why he hasn't come to the meetings. I guess it doesn't bother him that much, so.
Because that already has to work.
He just uses it as an office, so.
Right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate you being here.
Is that all?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Supporters of the appellant?
So why don't we have, what, We'll give you your 2 minutes. Why don't we do this? Why don't we have supporters of the appellant come up first to do their, how many people want to testify? Let's see how many people there are first.
I show at least 2 people signed up.
Okay, so we'll give people a full 3 minutes this afternoon. So why don't we do supporters first for 3 minutes, and then opponents second for 3 minutes each
Okay, I have Garrett Stevenson and Kristen Malone
to support.
for support.
Okay, very good.
Good afternoon. My name is Garrett Stevenson. I'm here with my colleague, Casey Safley. And you might remember us, we previously had been some of the primary opponents of the old iteration of this project, but I'm happy to report that I'm here today to testify in favor of the new iteration of Mr. Crowell's design. Again, we represent Mrs. Roberts. You know, as you know, we've vigorously challenged the past design for a variety of reasons, and to the extent that that design ever comes to the fore again, of course, we would reserve all of the arguments in opposition to it we've submitted so far in writing. However, Mrs. Roberts, as well as her partner, Mr. Beglin, feel that this revised design is a huge improvement, particularly for 3 reasons. The first, and probably the biggest reason, is that they now have an additional 4-foot setback between their property line and the revised south building wall. Second reason is that there's been a reduction in height. It's going to add a lot of light and air, increasing their long-term quality of life. And then the third, I think, it sounds like we all agree that the addition of wood paneling to the exterior makes it a much more, makes it a building that's a bit more consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. You know, this was the result of the process that I believe Commissioner Fish sort of spearheaded for us and thought up, and I believe in this case it was successful, and I want to thank the council for allowing us this time to work with the applicant, but I also want to thank in particular the applicant for being willing to compromise with us, as well as Grace Jeffries, who handled a very difficult case with aplomb, in my opinion. At this point, I believe you have either in the record or about to be in the record a narrative from Mr. Ramus explaining how this design meets the applicable criteria. I hope that you will review that, consider it carefully, and ultimately approve this new revised design, which, again, we support. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Very good. Thank you, sir.
Those who oppose the appeal now?
Was there anybody else who wanted to speak in support of the appellant? Very good. Those who oppose?
I show 4 people signed up: Bill Phillips, Joy Lewis, and Priscilla Sturgis.
Thank you for your patience.
We'll go with Mary Sipe.
My name is Priscilla.
I'm sorry. Could you slide it towards
Slide it
you?
toward me?
Yeah, and Mary, is her green light on? Can you see?
It is.
Very good. Thank you.
Your light's on. It's good. Oh, okay. Priscilla Sturgis. Joy Lewis has laryngitis right now, so she may be skipping this if you might not be able to hear her. This apartment building, and by the way, I own the place at 113 Southeast 12th, where Bill and Joy live. Joy is my daughter. This apartment building still does not fit the neighborhood. We still have a 78-foot wall without an adequate setback. We're talking about 78 feet and about that between them. That's not sufficient. We still have no privacy or adequate light for our house and yard. We have no enforceable assurances in writing that we will not have damage to our house and the local water system from heavy equipment. We are not granting access to our property because of Mr. Crowell's vandalism in the past. I never gave him permission to tear down my legal fence, and in reality, I have never spoken to him in person or on the telephone. He has been very vacant. Please remember, net zero buildings in a wet climate are a liability to future taxpayers. We have a PCC building that is molding nicely or not so nicely in Newburgh because of that. Also, that destabilizing neighborhoods is a blight on Portland's future. Please give credence to your own PDC's committee recommendation to deny. Otherwise, you're undercutting their knowledge and authority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary Sipe. Last week I was here and I gave some public testimony on an appeal about a building in my neighborhood in regards to height. And when I gave that testimony, I said that there were two key words that popped into my mind, and one of them was money. The bottom line often that we end up talking about is money. And when we talk about height, increased height, we keep hearing about density. Density, so increased height equals density, density equals more units equals more money. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at the motives behind some of these buildings. The other word that I used was respect. And I think that's one of the things that we need to remember is, from what I'm hearing here today, it sounds like there's not any demonstration of respect for the people that are going to be living in this neighborhood next to this building. I find that really sad to see that. When we speak about things like this, we think, oh, yeah, you're against development. And no, development and more housing is all good if it's managed properly. And I think the Design Review Commission is managing this incident properly, and I hope you'll uphold it, their decision. Commissioner Fish, you mentioned when the gentleman expressed concerns about property damage during this construction phase. There's noise issues, livability issues, as I've talked about here numerous times, the noise queen. There is a legal process, but they shouldn't have to go through it. And it brought up something for me, again, pile driving, but when they did the what they call the crossover out at Dundee, the homes out there, a bunch of really nice new big homes. When they did the pile driving, some of those homeowners experienced over $40,000 worth of damage to their property as a result of the pile driving. And they filed a claim with ODOT. They were denied. Wasn't caused by our work. They sued them. It was denied. So there's a legal process, but that doesn't give you any guarantees at all unless you have some kind of an agreement up front. And so I just want to throw that out there also as a consideration. So again.
Mary, let me just say that
yeah.
Before I moved, I used to live in a house in Grant Park, and my next door neighbor had a little bungalow, and she sold it. It was torn down and replaced by kind of a monster house. And it took about a year of that process that we lived across from it. It had a big set of changes, how our house interacted with that house, and there was a lot of noise and other associated impacts. So I'm sensitive to those questions.
Yeah.
I'm also, though, at the same time, we have an official policy to encourage greater density and more development to accommodate more people. And think we have to be careful about not necessarily imposing on an ad hoc basis requirements on one developer that doesn't go to another. You're raising broader questions about how we deal with sound, for example, pile driving, and the council's taken up some of those bigger questions. I think it's harder when we look at it as sort of an individual by individual case, for us to craft mitigation measures, particularly anticipating damage, because it's not the typical way our legal system works, even though I agree with your sentiments.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. I think there are things, for the developer to think about as they're trying to be hopefully a good neighbor through this process. And I understand, the criteria is the bottom line, but in any event, there's always two sides to every situation. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Unless Bill Phillips is here, that's all who I have signed up.
May we invite Commissioner Malone to come and give her opinion?
Okay, thank you, sir.
May
Sorry,
we-
Commissioner.
May we invite Commissioner Malone from the Design Commission to give her opinion?
Come on up.
She's from the CRC, I think.
I just do CRC.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was here as a friend of the appellant.
However,
but
she
I-
did stay in a Quality Inn last night.
Oh, dear.
Sorry.
I just.
Actually, you have a very successful track record of persuading this council on hard issues, so I welcome your perspective.
Okay. I think, I would say that my perspective is pretty much in line with Commissioner Fish, which is, you change the policy for how a neighborhood is going to look, and you do it with this kind of removed, 30,000 feet perspective about, this is what is objectively good for the plan of the city and for how the city goes forward. And it's always going to be really difficult when the rubber meets the road and a neighborhood is changing and those policies are going into effect and they're affecting individual people. So I guess I would just say that the tough thing here is kind of separating sympathy for the difficulty of change and separating that from kind of moving forward with the policy that's been adopted and kind of sticking to your guns even when it's tough. In my limited experience with the city committee, that's something
Thank
that I've
you.
certainly learned. So that's all I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mayor,
Commissioner Fish.
before we have a discussion, could we have staff come back up?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, too. Commissioner Fish, did you have specific questions?
So we've reopened the record. We now have, Tim, this is now before us, right?
I'm glad you had a chance to look at it, yes.
Yeah. So we now have it, and we're clean on that. It's the mayor reopened the record. We have these plans. I will tell you, I'm heartened by the fact that in a mediation that we required, there has been progress. Apparently, not everybody is on board, but there's been progress with some of the landowners, and we now have the fruits of this before us in terms of changes, and I think these are substantial changes to the plan. So do you have any further guidance for us based on now what has been placed in the record?
Sure. This kind of feels like a design commission hearing, and this is what I would say when one commissioner asked me, what should we do next? And I think I would say, I would like to hear what all the commissioners feel about the proposal before I offer thoughts. I will say I have several concerns that I want to address, starting with staff has not had a chance to review these materials. I understand maybe it was a technical glitch on the part of it getting to us, the size of the files. Tim Ramus let me know that they tried to email us yesterday. We haven't reviewed any material. And so I would be very concerned about commissioners, council members, with all due respect, having a led-by-the-nose, page-turner conversation about some of the detailing that's critical to long-term viability of this project.
So options 2 and 3 on the list that you gave us contemplate that you would, in fact, get the plans, review them, and be able to provide some feedback to us if you felt there was a problem, correct?
Right, and the intent was this was kind of a discovery hearing in a way. We typically require 15 days to review information prior to have that information available, so I think that's where I'm a little bit at a loss on how to comment on how we feel about it.
Well, and I don't, it's one thing to say we're gonna close the door on Design Review Commission review. It's another thing to say we're gonna close the door on staff having a chance to tell us whether this is kosher. So does procedurally, if the council's desire is to have you review the plans and be able to weigh in on them, if that becomes the council, I don't know if that is the council's desire, but if that were, does option 2 or 3 make a difference? Is there a difference now between options 2 and 3 in terms of a review that you would do at the staff level?
I think that entirely depends on the majority opinion of the council on how we move forward. Some of the things that Grace and I were discussing as you were talking is making sure that the revisions don't trigger other zoning code standards like a plan check. I mean, there's some movement in massing and setbacks, and I mean, my first purview and looking, just watching it online, or excuse me, on the screen above, is it's essentially gotten smaller on one portion of the L, and so I don't necessarily see zoning code issues. It's just more a matter of evaluating what's been proposed.
Right, so since you've asked, I'll oblige, and we'll go down, we'll do whatever process the mayor wants. I am, based on what I have heard today and this hearing, I'm prepared to accept options 2 or 3, depending on which gives us the clearest path forward with conditions to make sure that what has been proposed satisfies our code. And I'd want to know from you how we would structure that to make sure that that all is worked out. And that's where I'd seek your advice if my view is shared by my colleagues. If it isn't, then it's a shorter conversation.
Commissioner Fish, let me help to further focus it. So I will not make a decision without staff having thoroughly reviewed this. So that also gets me at least to option 3. In addition, and I don't know if we have the ability to encourage this, and I'm looking to legal counsel, stop me right away if I'm getting out of the lane. But I heard a couple of the opponents say they don't feel comfortable with, given that this is a large construction project in immediate proximity to existing houses, all of which are antique houses. And given that there is a likelihood, or at least, in my opinion, a reasonable expectation that there could be some damage to the property, and the property owners have said they don't feel like they're protected, could I encourage the appellant to meet with them and try to work out an agreement in advance in the event that there is damage? Or is that just too far afield from the narrow band of this particular hearing?
That cannot be a basis of the decision. The decision needs to be made based on the criteria. So as policymakers, just as you previously did in terms of encouraging them to work together, you can offer that, but you can't use that as.
Good. Well, then I will simply offer that as a decent thing to do. And second of all, I will say to staff that my preference, Commissioner Fish, would be that the staff thoroughly review this and give us clear indications of whether they feel the criteria are or are not being met by this new design that the hearing is narrowly focused on. And third, I would add that if we go down that road, that constitutes a continuance of the hearing, which then starts triggering the 120-day problem, which means we have to resolve that issue as well, should the majority think this is the right thing to do at all. Am I correct in that assumption about issue number 3, the 120-day clock?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that if.
We would
if-
have to
if
extend that 120 days.
Seek agreement.
You would have to request an extension.
Request, and we are, to be clear,
A
we're requesting that from the appellant.
Yes,
Mayor,
a
under these
waiver.
circumstances, in my 9 years on council, maybe Commissioner Fritz will correct me, I don't remember an appellant faced with the kind of Hobbesian choice that we're proposing would decline an invitation to extend the clock if they felt the thing was moving in the right direction.
Although I could see, just to argue the point, because it's fun, I could see financing becoming problematic in some circumstances when timing is at risk.
Can I counterpoint the mayor?
Please.
Just to be a little more clear.
Your name again? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Tim Herron, 1 R like the bird. I want to kind of hear or push pressure a little more on your comments. Were some of the changes you've seen today vis-a-vis the setbacks, the wood cladding, moving in the right direction?
Definitely an improvement over the original DR3 plan. Definitely an improvement in terms of particularly the 12th Avenue, the setbacks, the use of the wood. It is a shorter building that I think bodes better for light. The stairwell still confuses me, to be honest. I thought I heard, maybe you could clarify this since I've got you. I thought I heard through the first presentation that there was an opaque enclosure, or did I just make that up?
It was a screened enclosure, and I think this goes to really emphasize the point where staff, it's not just design review staff reviewing this, it's an opportunity to review the changes even against the building code, and some of the concerns have been raised relative to setbacks. And some setbacks might allow windows, some setbacks won't allow windows, and so it's a distinct appearance. And also, to be frank, I'm a little adverse to renderings representing reality lately. And so that's where the details really matter on some of these projects. And so hearing it's moving in the right direction is helpful for us in walking back and evaluating the proposal as resubmitted.
Very good. Clear as mud. Commissioner Fritz, yeah.
Thank you. The burden of proof is on the applicant to show that all the approval criteria are met. And if that's not so, then we must deny the appeal. So that to me is clearly an option, because I don't think there's clear demonstration of that the burden of proof has been met. We've just received this today. Staff had not received it at all. We are supposed to have 15 days to be able to look at it carefully, and we've been in this process for a long time, so it's not clear to me why this wasn't given to us ahead of time. I think it would set a very bad precedent for us to do number 2 of granting the appeal under this circumstance, that it's not been properly vetted by staff, and it only takes care of one of the 3 property owners who are most concerned. And the ones who are most impacted are the 2 who are still getting no relief on the setbacks, the wall issue. And they're going to be surrounded on 2 sides by this. So I think it's good that there's been movement that helps out one property owner to be able to support it, but it doesn't go far enough, I don't think. In terms of the 120-day clock, I hope that the applicant would, the appellant would grant another extension. Of course, as I said up front, they could, if we don't make a decision by August 5th, they could go to court and say, and demand that this, whatever, be approved. So that would be a gamble that they would have to take, and of course, more time into that. And unfortunately, I'd like to continue the hearing again, because I'm not comfortable that the approval criteria are met on the 2 sides of the L, the inner 2 sides. I do believe we could put some conditions of approval on it. For instance, I've seen conditions of approval requiring a bond, so that if there's any damage to adjacent properties, that the property owners don't have to go through the legal system. As was said, they can't afford a lawyer. So there could be a safeguard through the conditions of approval that would make them seem know that they would get compensated. Commissioner Fish will remember the discussion we had on accessory dwelling units and how I was opposed to allowing them at 0 setbacks. Everybody was horrified that I was doing such an un-Portland-like thing, but I was the only one who voted against that. I was watching a Thorns game at Barzi pub, and a woman, minding my own business, watching the game, woman comes up to me and says, I'm a developer of ADUs, and you were right, we cannot do it right onto the property line. It's just not possible to not touch any of the other adjacent properties, and certainly we want to be able to allow people to maintain the other side of the property. And she said, unfortunately, the council did them a disservice because now all the ones who are wanting to build the ADU say, oh, it's allowed by right, of course we should do that. And so, yes, in commercial zones and in areas where everything is built to the property line, that's different, but this isn't. And one of the approval criteria with the design guidelines is about the relationship to adjacent residential properties. So I do agree that there's been some good movement. I believe there needs to be more, and I do also believe, as I did last time, it would be in everybody's best interest to get to yes on this proposal, because if you get to no, what's going to be allowed by right later is going to be bigger and not definitely all that much better. It will still have to meet the design guidelines, but it would be difficult. The owners, the property developers, loans and other things are in jeopardy the longer if it was to be denied and start again, that would be problematic for them too. So it really would be better for all sides if all sides of this development were considered and not just the two that have had adjustments to them.
Commissioner Daly, if you have a comment.
I need some clarity on this because this is the furthest into this process that I've personally gone. So none of these options mean having these plans go back to design review. That would require a new application.
That's correct,
Okay.
yeah.
So it would be up to staff to determine whether or not the approval criteria that was flagged by design review has now been resolved.
Right, so just as we do with the Design Commission for a Type 3, staff does a recommendation of approval, so we could give a recommendation, but the decision makers are yourselves, so.
Okay.
We do that to advise.
And if we go with alternative number 2, we can add a contingency. Is that right? It's contingent upon approval or recommendation by staff? This is where I'm getting confused.
So part of, I think, what makes this seem a little unclear between 2 and 3 was this was written before any drawings staff had anything.
Right.
We didn't know what was going to happen today. If the record opened, if all of a sudden some drawings were going to show up, we didn't know. So this was just written to say, look, we would advise you that you need a full set of drawings is needed to actually, to have findings against it. So this was really just sort of a little heads up. Need a full set of drawings to write findings, and those full set of drawings are then compared against, for the building permit drawings. So that being the case, as Nick was pointing out, both these options require probably a waiver of the 120-day clock because there is, August 5th is imminent.
Yeah.
So may I just take a crack at that question? Because to me, 2 is telling the staff, tell us how we can approve this because it's granted the approval. And we're saying, give us findings that validate that we should approve this. Number 3 is tell us whether to approve it and what else might need to be done before it's approvable.
Is that a fair characterization?
I think that was excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Fritz.
Commissioner Fish. I'm sorry, Commissioner Daly, I apologize.
Yep, not quite done.
Sorry.
So these 7 approval criteria all appear to me to be relatively subjective. There's nothing that I can comfortably say right now. On no point can I say, yes, you have met this criteria, or no, you haven't. I do think a lot of progress has been made. I do think that the appellant, is that what we're calling the developer? The appellant, has made a meaningful, good faith effort. My main remaining concern is that while a property owner can develop a building they want to develop on their property, given our constraints. I think some of the neighbors may wish that the whole thing would just go away, which is not going to happen. That developer doesn't have the right to infringe on the other properties. So I'm not satisfied that this 1.5-foot setback on the, where are we? The north side, is
Yes.
going to allow them to construct the building as is without entering and possibly damaging the neighbor's property. And that was a question I brought up in the first hearing. It wasn't satisfactorily addressed. So that's my main remaining concern. And I guess I would lean towards 3 because I really would want these plans adequately reviewed by staff and get your findings.
Commissioner Fish?
So Mayor, can we ask staff to stay here and invite Mr. Ramos and the architect to come forward for 1 second? Because I would like to, with your permission, put a proposal on the table for consideration.
Happy to hear it.
So I would like to propose, and to staff, if I get this wrong, you'll help me dress it up, that we continue the hearing. That we ask the applicant to extend the 120-day clock by 30 days. That we close the record. Mr. Ramos, how long would you and the architect and your client need to present a full set of plans to the Bureau?
We'll need about 2 weeks.
We'll take 3. So let's say it takes you 3 weeks. Mr. Herron, how long, understanding it's the summertime and we don't want you to rush this, how much time would you like to review whatever plans are submitted under option 3, which gives you the option of reviewing them and then giving us your feedback?
Could I answer that question after I ask the appellant? Tim, we haven't had a chance to even look at the drawings that maybe got caught in a digital logjam. How different are those from what you would present in the next 3 weeks anyway? And to light of some of the comments.
Yeah, there would be no substantive change. What you have, what we tried to get to you are essentially elevations, so you'll want more detailed drawings.
And that's what you need to generate.
Yes.
So to be clear, and I'll look at Lauren a little bit, I don't think we could close the record right now because we want to leave it open for the applicant the opportunity to submit the additional information.
Right.
So we want to set a date for that. I would say the sooner you can get that to us, the better, and set that as a deadline.
One clarifying question from legal counsel. Can we keep the record open narrowly? In other words, can we keep the record open for the purpose of receiving these plans from the appellant?
Yes.
But close the record to?
Okay.
Yes, but that would be considered new evidence, and so people would
therefore
have
we
the
would have-
opportunity to
okay.
respond to it.
Thank you for
So
answering that
let me go
question.
back because this is
Thank
very
you.
helpful for me. So Mayor, this is my proposal.
Very good. Let's hear it.
We continue the hearing. We seek from the appellant a 30-day extension of the 120-day clock, which I assume they will grant.
Can I make one suggestion to that?
Please.
So my understanding is that the applicant has initially waived the 120 days. And so where we're at right now is what we would ask for, what traditionally we would ask for is a waiver of ORS 227, just so that we can accomplish this within all of the statutory timelines that are set out. And Mr. Ramos and I can discuss the details. I think he's familiar with
Yes.
what we ask for.
We'll be happy to work that out with council.
Okay, good. ORS 227?
So we would continue the hearing. We would structure a mutually agreeable waiver, as council's just alluded to. We would continue this hearing, Mayor, to a date certain, and I would suggest, since I think we all are probably in the same mindset, we'd like to do one last hearing. find a date at the end of July or early August where there's enough time has elapsed that we can have a final substantive hearing, that we encourage the applicant to continue to consult with the neighbors. That's a good question. We can't compel that, but we'd encourage that. And you've heard, you've had the benefit of hearing from my colleagues today about the remaining concerns, and you've heard the testimony from the opponents, so I think you have a sense of what's still in play. And then, Mayor, the intent would be to come back on a date, on a time certain, to resolve this case, which includes all three options, and assuming, and if the consensus was options 2 or 3, we may also choose to craft conditions at that point. But it would be our intention to resolve the matter at the final hearing.
So Commissioner Daly and I both said that we were not satisfied with the design changes with respect to the 2 properties within the L. So I agree with the gist of the process, but in terms of getting the exact specifications of what you just gave us now to the staff for evaluation, am I correct, Commissioner Daly, that you and I are wanting to see some more changes?
I wouldn't say necessarily wanting to see more changes, just wanting to hear from staff, I guess, first, as to the feasibility of what they're, saying they can do, which is not infringe on the neighboring property.
Can I speak to that real shortly?
Sure.
I mean, if you, I would say that the drawings that you were shown today only looked at this proposal from the south. So I would caution a couple things. One is that there were no images shown from the north.
Yeah.
There will be no windows on that elevation. A 1.5-foot setback is also only proposed there, so they can't put windows on that elevation due to code. So I think it's hard to say that it's meeting the guidelines on that side without some sort of substantive change beyond what's there based on what we've seen. So there's a staff's first go at what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think the beauty of the proposal I put on the table is that everyone understands what the implications are. Maybe it argues for having a slightly later date so that staff can review and have an iterative process with the applicant. Does that make sense, Mr. Herring?
Yeah, it does. Could I counterpoint? I've been through a lot of design commission hearings, and since this feels like a design commission hearing, I'm still to this day amazed coming away from a room where we thought we were clear in the message and everyone hears it differently, even when it's recorded. I think what's important about 2 of the 4 voting members on this commission right now is clarity that the north setback may not be adequate vis-a-vis whether addition of windows or other means. I know for a fact that this team has struggled to do any setback because there hasn't been one for 5 design commission hearings. So I'm wondering if that is a fatal flaw. And we hear right now from them with at least 2 of the 4 voting members, which is enough to cause a problem,
Well,
if that's not adequate enough.
I don't think Dan has recused himself, so he could be back here for the final hearing.
He'd have a lot of tapes to listen to.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
So that's where I'm operating with the 4 in front of me. It needs a majority vote to pass. So I guess it would be helpful to hear, perhaps from you all, is it critical that this facade be fenestrated relative to adding windows or additional massing breaks and or setbacks beyond 18 inches on the north side of the frontage of the L that lands on 12th? Because I think that's very important for this appellant to hear, because I think they're extremely squeezed.
Mr. Ramos, you've heard at least 2 colleagues.
Well, in reaction to your proposal, certainly that's a direction that we would be wanting to work with. And so we would work with council on the continuance and whatever's necessary in terms of waivers. With respect to the setback on the north side, the difference between the north and the south is that the building on the south side is built close to the property line, within about 2 feet, whereas the building on the north is set back quite a bit further. So if the objective we were trying to work with was keeping the separation rhythm about the same, which implies a lesser setback on the north side. And the constraint we're working with is, of course, trying to keep the livability and workability of that first floor unit. So we would obviously look at anything, but that's the constraint we're working with.
So let me just say that it's a very real constraint. I will tell you my predisposition based on what I've heard so far. First of all, I appreciate the appellant coming back with what I think is a greatly improved design over what we saw last time. I'm appreciative of the fact that at least with some people who previously opposed the project, you've solicited and secured their support. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. I want to get to yes on this. I really do. And I understand we have this massive conflict in our city between growth and the unique character of our neighborhoods. And that is the struggle, and that is the burden of this council, having gone through the other iterations in this process. It's landed here, and frankly, we're going to see a lot more of this. And that's why it's important to me that we start figuring out how to codify this and standardize the process, because eventually we will be challenged in terms of this process, because in effect we are becoming the Design Review Commission. Which is not a good thing. I'll just say that point blank. These things should be resolved long before they come to the Portland City Council, but it didn't. So I'm trying to get to yes. I have said very clearly that I support the need for additional housing in our community, and that there is appropriate density and there is inappropriate density. And I'm trying to get this into the box of being appropriate if we can. But what I've also heard staff say is they are not convinced that what you have provided meets the criteria. That's a real concern to me. So in essence, Commissioner Fish is giving everybody a golden opportunity, and I support him in this effort, and I will support this effort to continue the hearing for people to hear what is being said. If Commissioner Saltzman doesn't come back, you're hearing potentially 2 of the 4 commissioners who are present and will potentially be here for the next hearing saying it's a non-starter. And so take that as you may in terms of where that leaves this process. So I don't know if we need a formal motion or if we just need a head nod or what's appropriate in this circumstance.
There is a clarification in your proposal that I'd like to pursue. And you had
Please.
mentioned at one point closing the record, which doesn't work for us because
we're
we
not-
have
we agree.
additional information.
That ship sailed.
I've been disabused of
Yeah,
that.
that ship sailed.
Tim has admonished every single member of council, except the one member of council who actually he reports to. Very strategic, but, no, but I'm kidding. But I
don't
took
feel
that, I've been
admonished.
disabused of that.
Thank you.
So continue the hearing, work out a waiver. Then I think the only thing left for us to do, Mayor, is to see if there's a date that the 4 of us are available. And I would look to early August so that there's enough time for this process to play out. Because my intent, I share the mayor's sentiments. There's a path to getting to yes for me. And ultimately, though, we need to decide this case. And so I would like to have your best shot in front of me when we come back for a time certain in August. And there's a clear path to yes for me. Mayor, should we ask Carla maybe to see if there's a date?
Yes, why don't you do that, Carla? I'm looking at the calendar now.
We're looking at early August is when everybody is back in. I have August 3rd, which is Thursday, August 3rd at 3:10 p.m.
That works for me.
So I show that I need to be in Hermiston, but I'm not clear why, at 5 p.m. So that is tight unless we could do it on Wednesday, the 2nd.
The noise review is holding 2 hours at 2 p.m.
Very good.
The 9th at 2 p.m. is available,
The 9th at 2,
and everybody's in right now.
I'm here. Colleagues?
Works for
Commissioner
me.
Fritz, is this framework okay?
Yes, and I hope that by agreeing to extend the clock and to go back to the table on this, there is a willingness to move that setback, which, as staff has said, has been stuck on the property line for now 6, 7 hearings.
Commissioner, I want to mention for your record here that this issue of how you build and how you build without unduly impacting people was the first topic I recall that we talked about in detail at the mediation. And we made clear that we would avoid techniques like driving pilings into the ground. And we also said that we would be willing to develop a process to do an evaluation of the foundations and the construction of our homes nearby so that we would have a baseline for addressing that. And that's worked into the agreement that we've got with Ms. Roberts. So we're sensitive to that and be happy to work and build on that.
That wasn't you didn't answer the question that I asked, and that is it clear that the setback needs to be increased so that there isn't a 75-foot blank wall right on the property line?
I understand your argument. Thank you.
Thank you. Because otherwise you could just say no and we could deny the application and start over. But I don't, like my colleagues, I don't think that's in anybody's best interest.
All right, so the 9th, Wednesday is on the table. Did we have a time certain, Carla?
2 p.m.
And so for the appellant, does that work?
Yes.
Very good. And
yes, we're good with that.
Good enough. Okay, I appreciate your flexibility on that. All right, so, sorry, Commissioner Fritz?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to say, Commissioner Fish, thank you for for guiding the mediation process. I'm assuming that should additional help from Resolutions Northwest be needed for this final piece, that you'd be willing to help with that?
Certainly. And let me just close by saying we have an imperfect process. And I share the mayor's concern about having this be a regular feature on our agenda. We don't have the bandwidth to do this. And we generally like to play referee to make sure the process below was handled fairly. We're getting more and more into making substantive decisions where there's a conflict or where there's a big disagreement about a recommendation from the Design Review Commission. I don't see that as sustainable, and I don't think that, I agree with the mayor, I don't think that is our best use. However, I will say that we are closer to yes than I ever would have thought on this project. So I want to tip my hat to everybody who's been working on this, because I think my reading of the tea leaves is it might have been going the other way. And so please don't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Let's work hard to get to a place where the council has an opportunity to say yes. That's my view.
Very good. So we are continuing the hearing to Wednesday, August 9th, 2 p.m., Portland City Hall Chamber. That is where we are currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And then Seven, 2, 9.
Authorize a non-binding term sheet with Peregrine Sports LLC for a proposed expansion of Providence Park.
Colleagues, I'm very pleased to be introducing this next item, which takes a big step forward towards implementing Peregrine Sports' proposed expansion of the city's historic stadium. This privately funded $50 million expansion will make a positive contribution to our local economy, provide greater access to the Timbers and Thorns games, and hopefully bring some exciting new events to the stadium. This deal, I believe, is a great example of private business stepping up and funding improvements they need that will also benefit the community. We are in partnership with them in making co-investments to help provide those services and infrastructure that the city would ordinarily provide with such a project. Tom Reinhardt, the city's chief administrative officer, will provide an overview of the deal terms, and then Mike Galoob with Peregrine Sports will provide some additional information. Hello, gentlemen. Tom?
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. My name is Tom Reinhardt, for the record, city's chief administrative officer. I'm proud to be here with my colleague Susan Hartnett, who's here, and in case any detailed questions come up. But after a short presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, as the mayor said. I'm going to do two things in my time. I'm going to provide an overview and context of how we got here today so we're all clear, and then I'm going to do a brief overview of the term sheet and the elements within. As you know, discussions about a possible expansion of the city-owned stadium currently called Providence Park have been happening for about a year. Over the last couple of months, you have taken several actions to bring this proposal to fruition. You approved a resolution expressing support for Peregrine's proposal, which kicked things off in May. And 2 weeks ago, council approved an exemption to the competitive bid requirements, which continued the progress. Over the ensuing weeks since your last action, OMF and Peregrine have negotiated on the terms, and the resolution before you today will authorize a non-binding term sheet that captures the essential elements of the agreement. After today, we will collaboratively develop the formal agreements that lock in the business terms that you authorize, which we expect to bring back for council action before construction begins. So that's the background. Welcome, Commissioner. The term sheet. It covers a range of items, and I'm going to touch on a few of the key elements, and I'm sure Mike will speak about it as well. Peregrine will be fully responsible for the design and construction of the expansion, which will consist of 3,000 to 4,000 additional seats in a new 3 to 4 floor building that will extend into the right-of-way on 18th Avenue, creating an arcaded sidewalk with a cantilevered roof covering the new and existing east side seating area. I'm sure you're all familiar with the drawings at this point. Peregrine will pay all project costs, currently estimated at $50 million, including any cost overruns, and the city will pay the cost of legal and professional fees needed to oversee the city's interest in the development. Peregrine Sports will be exempted from their ticket tax obligations under the stadium operating agreement through 2021 or 2022 on the existing stadium seats and on the new seats through calendar year 2025. The length of the exemption on the existing seat tax obligation depends on when the expansion area opens. The existing seat exemption will end in 2021 if the new seats open in 2019. It will end in 2022 if the new seats open in 2020. You may recall that the initial request from Peregrine is for a full 10-year exemption on only the new seats, beginning in the year that the expansion opens. The overall value of the revised proposal is similar, but the city's foregone revenue occurs sooner and then ends in 2025. This arrangement meets both Peregrine's needs and helps provide greater protection to the spectator fund and hence the city's general fund as revenue begins flowing back to the city sooner, particularly addressing concerns particularly raised by Commissioners Udaly and Commissioners Fritz previously. Keeping in mind that projections are just that, and that the further out into the future that we go, the more likely that we are to be wrong, I wanted to provide a few estimates of the overall financial impact of these deals, the deal terms to the spectator venues and visitor activities fund, just so we're clear. As a reminder, and I'm sure longtime council members already know this, OMF uses a conservative approach to our projections for both the fund and the general fund in general to provide a higher level of protection. This means that we underestimate revenues and overestimate expenses. Historically, except for years when the unexpected happens, such as strikes or major economic downturns, the fund typically outperforms our projections. With that as a preface, the overall value of the tax exemptions included in this term sheet is approximately $3.7 to $5.1 million, depending on performance. The overall net increase to the spectator fund is estimated between $2 million and $5 million between now and 2038, which is the end of the extended term of the operating agreement. Peregrine is still hoping to start construction this fall and expects the majority of the work to occur between the MLS and NWSL off seasons. And with that, I invite Mike Golub, the president of business for Peregrine Sports, to provide some additional information about the project, unless any of you have questions at this time.
I have a question.
Yeah, Commissioner Daly.
When was the change made to the agreement around foregoing commission on all seats? My understanding was it was just commission on the new seats.
The change was made after council passed the initial resolution. when we heard very clearly that protecting the general fund in the future, particularly past 2025, was a priority for at least 2 members of council. Our team went back to the table with Peregrine, and we worked hard to figure out an arrangement that could both provide what they said they needed and also protected the Spectator Venues Fund in that critical period after 2025, when we have to be assured we can make all debt service payments. So the basics of this is the exemption is basically similar value. The way the revenue flows is different.
Okay.
There's more money exempted upfront for Peregrine in the initial few years, and then in the out years, more money flows back to the city.
Yeah, it just seems like a pretty major detail that I somehow did not get.
It is a
briefed on.
change, yes.
Okay.
Yes. We feel comfortable that it's the same value exemption in terms of, it didn't change the dollar figure much.
I get it.
And it
I'm-
presented more
yeah.
protection for us, so apologies if we didn't give you more, the full
And it
briefing.
is
on it.
helpful that you pointed out we will eventually see a net increase
Yes.
in revenues. I felt like that was a detail that people were missing. Is we have a stadium that is suitable for a wider range of events, and we're booking it more nights, then we're going to bring in more money. But I just think it's really important to lay those things out for the public who might see this as not a gain.
Any other questions before I turn it over to Mike? And I will stay, and Susan will stay if there are other questions. Great. Mr. Golub.
Good afternoon, Mike Golub, President of Business for the Portland Thorns and the Portland Timbers, and thanks very much for having us today. As I've said many times, we believe much of our success that we've had with the Thorns and Timbers have been predicated on the partnership that we've had with the city at every level, and we greatly appreciate it. And we believe that this new chapter in our partnership, or potential new chapter in our partnership, positions all of us, the city, our club, and also the fans, to flourish long into the future. As Mayor Wheeler said in his introductory remarks, this is a win for our fans. It's a good thing for the club, to be sure, and we believe it's a good thing for the city, both near term and long term. And we appreciate greatly the cooperation we've had from Tom, Susan, Carl, Ken, and the entire team from the city and from all of you.
Any further questions for Mike or Tom? Public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
I think Mike is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
I wanted to take a few moments, if possible, to show you a couple of the images that have been generated on the expansion 2B that you might be interested in. Hopefully they're queued up here.
That looks familiar.
Mike, you're
That
going to
is
have to
not
work
the
on
thing.
it. You're going to have to work on the setbacks.
Yeah, thanks for
Before council goes running from those.
Thanks for the memories, Mike.
Oops.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks. Can you come work for us? Thank you. So this is a rendering. We're looking west, an aerial view from the west of what the expansion, the new roof, and the connectivity to the existing stadium will look like. This is the intersection of Southwest Morrison and 18th Street. The MAX station is to the left. Our main entrance on 18th is to the right, and you see the new section and how it's being imagined and brought to life.
I really appreciate that you had thunderclouds and it looks like it's been raining, so it's much more realistic.
Cinema verite. This is from Taylor Street looking west, and it gives you a sense of the openness and transparency that our architecture team is seeking between the city and the stadium. This is a view from the southwest corner of the field looking up to the expansion area. And so you notice the roof now covers the entire sideline, and the seats are very close to the field, and it gives us, we hope this really takes the energy we already have and amplifies it. And lastly, I wanted to show you an image. Recently, this was sent to us by someone who actually had a physical copy. But this is the Oregonian from January 31st, 1926. And it shows you, an image of what was then referred to as Civic Stadium, of a multi-level east side, much like we're contemplating now. And the headline, if you can read it at the top, is 100,000 fans someday to be seated at Multnomah Field, but 35,000 fans to be seated this fall. And so we enjoyed uncovering this, and it's nice that we're, in a sense, picking up the baton of the original image 90 years ago.
Was it originally 35,000? What happened to all those seats?
I don't know what transpired between this image and the ultimate construction.
If it was 35,000, we'd be all set, right? We wouldn't do this at all.
So maybe next time we're in front of you, we're asking for another 75,000 seats. But we thought this was interesting.
Tom, just because it's late in the day and we're all a little groggy, can I summarize what you told us and just have you tell me whether it's accurate or not?
Yes.
So we've retooled the deal. So in three respects. One is that we're front-loading a little bit more of the deferred revenue. Two is we're changing the timeline with a couple of contingencies. And three is the cost to our funds is roughly the same in the aggregate.
I think that's accurate, unless Susan.
Susan is nodding.
Okay, Susan's
She hasn't fainted. Susan, is that fair enough? Yes, it is. And those changes meet our needs and are acceptable to Peregrine.
Yes. We wouldn't be here today promoting this if we didn't think it was acceptable. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Very good. And and that completes your presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Any further comments, colleagues?
Mr. Mayor,
I'll just say this, Mayor. I did go to a Thorn game the other night. I ordered 3 sodas and a slice of pizza. It was around $29. I feel like I've made my personal contribution to this project, and I just want that noted.
Keep it coming.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
But was
Duly
it-
noted. Excellent. Call the roll. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Daly.
Tom, because I was asked a question about this yesterday by a journalist that estimated 3 to 5 million in administrative costs, where does that money come out of?
So
It's
I'm not familiar with that number. What I'm familiar with is the 800,000 that we are estimating on the legal costs and the
Oh,
owner's
okay.
rep, which is
Well, I'm not sure where that number came
what
from
we've
either,
estimated
so-
in terms of our costs. I don't know if, Susan, do you want to, I don't know if,
I mean, I know who said it to me. I don't know where.
Yeah, our estimate for I'm sorry, Susan Hartnett, Office of Management and Finance, our estimate for the cost of both legal representation, outside counsel, and an owner's rep team, which includes an architect and an engineer, cost estimator, as well as a construction project manager, is based on our past expenses. I think 800,000 may actually end up being a little bit more than we will spend. But going into this, as Tom said earlier, we tend to overestimate expenses and underestimate revenue. So I'd rather tell you it's 800,000 and come in less than that. We are currently committed through contracts for $600,000.
So the number I was given was actually 3.2 million in hard costs, which was legal counsel, representative for project oversight, and property insurance. So is that just
I think
false?
that number would also include our increased costs for property insurance,
Right.
which is about $1 million.
Okay.
Plus our increased costs for repair and replacement expenses, which is close to $2 million. So I
Okay.
think if you add all of that up, that's probably a correct number. But again, when you look at the overall impact to the fund, it is a net positive. So when you take
Yes.
the new revenue, take out those expenses, we still end up in that net positive.
And I did point that out to them, and hopefully that made it into the paper as well.
Yeah, and I believe I just spoke with the same journalist
Okay.
and did make
All
some
right.
clarifications.
And that comes out of
The spectator venue and venue and
so
visitor
we're
facilities, yeah.
It's not general funds, it's not
Correct.
special appropriations, it's, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to take a quick minute to thank Susan and Carlisle and Dina and all the great people who've worked on this. It's been a lot of work. I pulled them off a lot of other assignments. I'm not angry at Mike, but I did pull them off a lot of other assignments. They did a tremendous job, so I want to recognize them.
Thank you for
Agreed.
that recognition, Tom. Well deserved. Thank you. Anything else, colleagues? Please call the roll.
Fish?
No, there was no public testimony on the item.
Mayor, I'm going to support this resolution. I believe it's a good deal for the city of Portland. It's a good deal for taxpayers, and it's great news for fans of soccer. We own this stadium, and we have a partner willing to invest $50 million to make an addition which will make this an even greater stadium. And I'm particularly appreciative that they've hired a local architect with an international reputation to do so, Brad Klofel. The presentation that has been made to us says this is a fiscally responsible deal. And when you look at the private contribution versus the public contribution in the nature of foregone revenue, I think it's a terrific deal. So I'm pleased to support it, and I thank both Peregrine and our revenue and our team for negotiating this deal. Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, our relationship with the Portland Timbers and Thorns has always been a partnership from day one when they first arrived in town and when we undertook some basic renovations in order to accommodate Major League Soccer in our city. And it's something that we've not had to look back on and regret since. And this is this partnership today that moving forward is only further evidence of both the popularity of the Timbers and Thorns to Portlanders, but also the firm commitment I believe that both the Timbers and the Thorns have to the city of Portland, and certainly the city of Portland has to the Timbers and Thorns and to its many, many fans. I'm pleased to support this deal. Aye.
Udaley.
Well, spectator venues are one of many things I just didn't anticipate having to devote time to with my new job. So I want to thank Susan and Tom for their patience in explaining the inner workings of this part of the city. And I agree that in the long run, it is a good deal for the city. Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you very much for your work. It's certainly a better deal than the original changeover. This one does have a balance sheet at the when you add everything up in 2035, the city should come out with 2 to 5 million more than we were expecting before. So that is a long payback period. I appreciate the changes that were made since the last discussion we had, because it does protect the general fund better in 2025 and thereafter, when we don't know whether the Blazers will still be able to continue to subsidize soccer by the Blazer tickets and also the parking revenue over in the Rose Quarter. So thank you for your hard work on this. Thank you to the Timbers and Thorns and the Peregrine organization. It's certainly you can't put a price on joy, and there is a lot of joy that happens at these games and lots of frustrations that get vented, shall we say. And so I think that's also a positive thing. Aye.
Wheeler.
So I'm going to save my thanks for Tom Reinhardt today. Tom, when we first met with Mike and with Merritt Paulson many, many months ago on this, we came in with more questions than answers, and you flipped that. And I've enjoyed working with you on a whole host of issues, from college savings to retirement savings to bonding projects, and now of all things, soccer stadiums. So here we are coming full circle. But thank you and your team for hearing this city council, addressing our concerns, going back and negotiating in good faith. And thanks, of course, to the folks at Peregrine for hearing those concerns and being responsive to those concerns and putting together what we think is ultimately going to be a blockbuster deal for the city of Portland. It's a win-win, and that's how all such transactions should end. So obviously, I support this, and the resolution is passed. Thank you for all your help. Next item, 730.
Authorize a 5-year use and occupancy agreement with Atlantic Aviation for hangar space at Portland International Airport through January 31, 2021 for Police Air Support Unit.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience.
My name is Pauline Goebel. I'm property manager in the Bureau of Internal Business Services, and with me is Officer Sweeney from the Portland Police Bureau. We are here today to request council authorize a 5-year use and occupancy agreement with Atlantic Aviation for hangar space at Portland International Airport, and that is related to the Police Bureau's Air Support Unit. They respond to They respond to mission requests on a call-out basis. The ASU averages over 200 mission requests each year, with nearly a quarter of those being requests that require an immediate response. For background, the ASU moved to the Portland International Airport in July of 2007. Previous to that, they were located at the Pearson Airport in Vancouver, Washington, but they moved for several reasons. One was security. Pearson Airport is not a secure airport, and they needed a space with secure perimeter fencing and pedestrian access to be restricted. The possibility of some tampering with their aircraft was a real concern. Also, access. To access Pearson, crew members had to cross one of 2 interstate bridges. These bridges, in combination with the increased driving distance from Portland, created serious traffic choke points that increased their response times to call-outs by 30 minutes or more, even more during commute times. Regarding the lease renewal, prior to beginning the renewal process, the chief pilot looked at 3 other nearby airports to find comparable facilities. None of those other airports had any secure office spaces available. Secure airports pose problems with refueling the aircraft after business hours. Some could not guarantee that they would even have access to the aircraft after business hours. So why Atlantic Aviation? Atlantic Aviation is the only fixed base operator at the airport. The chief pilot explored the possibility of other facilities at the airport with the Port of Portland, but none were available. So the police have budgeted for a 5-year term with payments funded by existing Bureau General Fund appropriation. This agreement is automatically renewed each year, but has a termination clause of 60 days prior to the end of the termination. So they're budgeting for 5 years, so this is an automatic renewal agreement. So, do you have any questions?
Very good, colleagues. Any questions? Commissioner Fritz?
I remember this from the last time we did it, so could you just tell folks at home and here, why do we have aircraft? What do they do?
Just to be clear, I'm assigned to the traffic division. That's my full-time job. I do the air support unit on a part-time basis where this pager goes off and I respond there. So I have a pretty good understanding of what the air support unit does. I'm filling in for the chief pilot who couldn't make it here today. So and can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
What does it do? Why do we need it? How is it helpful?
It provides a layer of safety for the community members and for the officers. We have technology that's in the airplane that allows us to see particular things on the ground that the ground officers can't see. If it's a serious crime, we're typically called out all hours of the day to respond to it and try and locate an individual who needs to be taken into custody. So it's kind of a general answer for it, I guess.
So the airplane, it's not a helicopter, it's an actual airplane, right?
Two aircraft.
And so they would be flying, they would be dispatched to fly around and see if they could see the person hiding on the ground or something?
Correct. Typically, if we're up, our response times to be on scene are about 2 minutes. So it's much quicker than a patrol officer responding in a car or an SUV or something like that. So we can get eyes on a location when, say, a community member's called in, say a burglar, and they saw him run out the back of their yard and they go into a wooded area. That could take a long time for a officer in a car to respond to, depending on where they're at, if they're on another call, if they're even clear. If we're up and can get there in a quick period of time, we can locate the person usually, set up a perimeter, and then call in resources to take them into custody. So we're fairly efficient.
What elevation do they fly at?
It depends on the weather. Our goal is to be higher rather than lower. We're cognizant of noise complaints. We don't like to hover over certain areas for long periods of time because some of the members in the community don't like it. It makes them nervous, and it's understandable. So our goal when we go out is to be as high as possible. There's limitations on the equipment that's in the airplane. The higher you go, the image deteriorates. So 4,000 feet would be the goal. The other factor in that is if there was an engine failure or some sort of emergency, we want to be able to get back to a safe place and land it, preferably not in the city, on the city streets, back at the airport.
And do they have like heat sensors so they can see who's hiding in the bushes or whatever? Or that somebody is?
That's essentially kind of what we're looking at is a heat signature with the FLIR. That's located on the left side of both the aircraft that we fly, so, yeah.
And it's entirely so that you can then tell the people on the ground what you can see from up there.
That's the goal. Yeah, when we're called out and we're looking for someone who's committed a crime, usually a serious crime, is to find them hiding somewhere quickly.
And are they ever used before there's a crime? I mean, they're just for basically flying around watching stuff?
We'll be up for patrol support. So, for instance, say there's a call of a crash on 205 at Gleason, and they dispatch a car to it. Usually within a minute or two, we can have our eyes on it and provide information to the officer that's responding. If they even need to go, it may free them up to not go if we can tell they're exchanging, they've moved on. So we try as much as we can to be up to facilitate that, yes.
But you don't just fly around looking for things that might be happening?
Yes and no.
Explain that.
I think
Well, just what I said, like a patrol support flight, we might go out for 4 hours. It's typically the length of the time of the flight because of crew fatigue, fuel exhaustion, about 4 hours. 5.5, we start running out of fuel, so we don't like to go that long. Where we can cover on calls, like I said earlier, our response time's about 2 minutes anywhere in the city, and relieve the officers that are driving the patrol cars around from actually having to go. If we can, that keeps them in their district responding to higher level calls. So if I can fly the airplane to a crash, to look for a burglar, you name it, whatever the emergency call is, that's the goal on one of those particular flights. On other times, we're up for certain specific reasons.
You're there so that you can get to the next place you're going quicker. You're not just flying around spying on people, I guess is my question.
Correct.
Thank you.
So just one other question, because I know we've already funded this service, and what you're asking us for is just to approve a lease agreement with a hangar. So it's a narrow question. But given what you've described as the mission, why is a fixed-wing Cessna preferable to a helicopter that can hover?
I certainly wouldn't be the one to answer that question. There's a lot of expenses with a helicopter.
Probably a cost.
Yeah, costs might be prohibitive. Don't quote me on any of this. I don't know for sure. I haven't looked into it myself.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of
Yeah.
helicopters
Right.
hovering in residential areas. I mean, when they do in my neighborhood, I don't love it, but it just seems like you have more flexibility with a helicopter. If you're in a Cessna, it seems like you have to do a lot of traversing.
That's what I do is I fly the airplane. It's very efficient. Certainly come out and fly with us sometime. Be happy to take anybody up and show them what we do. It works out really well.
Thank you for the invitation.
You should stop causing so much trouble in your neighborhood.
I mean, I've done a ride-along, but this would take it to a new level.
Be happy to do it.
Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. Any further questions, colleagues? Public testimony?
Yes, we have one person, Star Stoffer.
Very good, thank you. Star, could you keep it to, could we keep public testimony to 2 minutes, please?
2 minutes?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't
Thank
need
you.
very much time, I don't think.
Thank you.
Star Stoffer, I have a couple concerns about the claims he made in regards to hovering. Maybe they don't hover in Lake Oswego, but I definitely know that they hover in the northeast and outer southeast areas. The one thing that he also didn't cover was these planes' use in protests and targeting protesters and mapping them and reconnaissance in regards to these protesters, and also neighborhoods where there's vulnerable communities, because these planes are also used to map and recon with gang violence or suspected areas of gang violence. Why they then don't hover over their own police station is beyond me, because that's a gang in itself. My problem with this is it makes me wonder if one of these planes was one of the planes that chased Quantas Hayes when that all went down. And when you sit up here and say that you're following people around that have committed a crime, you are not qualified to make that statement because they haven't been convicted in a court of law. So they're still innocent until proven guilty, which unfortunately most of the cops in this city fail to remember that when they're operating under the authority the city gives them. I also have questions in regards to the cost, and how much is it costing each time one of these planes go out and they're on one of these 4-hour patrol flights? What is the cost to the community? What is the cost to the Portland Police Bureau? Because whatever it costs them, it's costing us. We're paying that in marijuana tax and other forms of taxes. So what is that costing the community to have these planes out, and why is that more efficient than a patrol car? Because even if he has to respond to a scene and then turn around, it seems to me that's still a more cost-effective way to be operating in a city that struggles with trying to find financing for even things like houseless services. I mean, I know that this isn't about approving a budget, this is about approving a lease with this hangar. But I'm thinking that at this rate, with the way that the Portland Police have been operating and the mistrust in the community and the targeting of people of color, you might want to consider not approving this and tabling it for more discussion.
Thank you. Any further public testimony? Please call the roll.
Fish?
Well, thank you for the presentation and the invitation. You know, Mayor, listening to the presentation about this previously being located at Pearson Airport, which, by the way, was the airport strip that caused the most havoc in getting to the CRC design because there were some limitations on height for any new span because of the Pearson. It does seem to me this is a great improvement to go to the Portland airport rather than to go to Vancouver for people that have to access this plane. So this makes sense, and the presentation, I think, was thorough. Thank you. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 7, we're now to the Housing Bureau. And the next item was 714, which was pulled from this morning's agenda. I don't know who pulled it.
Mr. Lightning pulled this.
And
Not here?
Mr. Lightning is not here.
Let's go to vote.
Is there any public testimony on 714? Call the roll.
Should read the contract, read the
You have
title.
to read it, sorry.
Increased contract with Income Property Management Company for operational expenses of the Joyce Hotel by $120,000 for a total value of $310,000.
Call the roll, please.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. And
Are we up to 732?
yes, we are now at 732.
Authorize intergovernmental agreement with Prosper Portland in support of the ongoing implementation of housing functions at the Portland Housing Bureau and economic opportunity functions at Prosper Portland.
And Kurt, before you start, and I will ask you to say your name again for the record, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more items. It is now 4:20. I will ask you to be precise and thorough, but not lengthy.
I'll be very precise.
Thank you.
Kurt Krieger, Housing Director. This is an annual renewal, an omnibus agreement, if you will, that contains all of the activities between Prosper Portland and the Housing Bureau. So it describes roles and responsibilities. It also embodies all the funds that go from PHB to Prosper and back from Prosper to PHB. There are 3 new elements to this agreement that I want to call to your attention, however. Over and above the 45% of the amount of tax increment financing in each open renewal area that is currently allocated to the Bureau, over and above that amount, Prosper has offered $5 million of the corpus of money that they administer for additional housing programs and resources. And they're specifically for households that the Housing Bureau would otherwise be unable to assist. And in the Exhibit A, they are in 3 categories. One is to provide down payment assistance for households between 80 and 120% of median income to the tune of $1.6 million. It's about 20 households. The Housing Bureau by itself is not currently authorized to loan at that income level. We are capitated at 80% of median income. So this is workforce housing for people otherwise priced out of in this instance, the the north-northeast area. In addition, they are providing $1.6 million to expand the home repair program for the same income group, 80 to 120% of median income. And we are starting a pilot for accessory dwelling units where the Housing Bureau would underwrite the cost of providing accessory dwelling units for longtime owners within the neighborhood who could then benefit from the earned income from those accessory dwelling units. Those would be secured by a deed of trust in favor of the city.
And would there be a requirement that they be for affordable housing rather than for Airbnbs?
Correct.
Thank you.
So as you well know from the evidence, the disparity between white household income and black household income is in large part real estate owned. That most of the assets that white households enjoy are the properties that they own, not other stocks or bonds or securities. And this is an attempt to try to correct that and ameliorate that problem. So other than that, I would say that we are transmitting from the Housing Bureau to Prosper Portland some $2 million for Work Systems, Inc. to provide services for chronically unemployed people. That has been going on for the entire 6-year history of the Housing Bureau under the migration of housing responsibilities to the Bureau. That amount is slightly down from last year because because the federal funds have been slightly reduced, but it's still $2 million.
Kurt, I think it's clear from the document we have at page 3, but just to clarify, the $5 million and the different components you've just put into the record, that's $5 million to be spent in northeast.
The interstate corridor urban renewal area specifically.
Specifically.
Yes.
So it's home ownership related initiatives within that URA.
That's correct, and it's over and above the 45% of TIF that the Housing Bureau already administers for that urban renewal area.
Right, and why is it so circumscribed?
Well, I think this did go to the North-Northeast Oversight Committee, and Prosper Portland wanted to clearly establish that they were reaching out to the neighborhood to correct some of the historic inequities. They challenged the Housing Bureau to come up with some creative ideas of how those funds might be used, and these were the 3 areas that passed muster with the Oversight Committee.
Thank you.
That concludes my remarks.
Very good, colleagues. Any further questions? Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Fish?
I'm pleased to support this, and the notes that I was given indicate that this is the last step in a rather lengthy process we initiated, I think, in 2009, to officially separate the housing functions, take them from PDC, place them in the new Portland Housing Bureau, and consolidate them. And as I look back on that action and the subsequent fruits of that action, I think it was a beneficial move for both agencies, both for PDC, focused on economic development, and the Portland Housing Bureau, which focused on the needs of people shut out from the housing market. Thank you for your explanation on the $5 million. Kurt, aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Next item, please.
733, amend Joint Office of Homeless Services intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County to authorize fiscal year 17-18 budget allocation to the Joint Office of Homeless Services.
Very good. Come on back. You actually don't have to go all the way back to your seat unless you want the
Stay here for the
exercise.
next 10 minutes.
Very good. Well, you make a grand entry. It looks good.
Kurt Krieger, Housing Director. This effectuates and implements the budget that you adopted on June 8th. There are no further changes. This merely rolls into the IGA, the adopted budget.
Director Krieger, do we have a date yet for a work session?
I don't believe it's been calendared, although we did meet with Burke, Nelson, and everyone wants it to happen is before Labor Day, preferably month of July.
Or August?
July or
There's some-
August.
July
I know
is
you have a tight calendar, but
Yeah, July has a lot of people on vacation, but they will be held this summer.
that's correct. We had a policy budget and alignment committee last week, and we talked about a range of options. Home Forward will be part of that presentation, as well as the Housing Bureau and obviously the Joint Office.
Thank you.
Very good. And Kristen and Mark, are you here for this particular item? Did you want to come up and just say a few words since you're here? Any advice on design review that you want to impart? Okay, thanks. I appreciate it very much. Colleagues, any further questions? Any public testimony?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Fish?
I'm very pleased that we are increasing our allocation to the Joint Office, and I look forward to the work session this summer where we can focus on sustainable funding for the long term. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
So this is adding over $26 million from the City General Fund to the work of the Joint Office, and thank you very much for all your work. It also includes $1.8 million federal funds, and long may that last. Aye.
Wheeler?
So I want to extend my thanks to my colleagues who worked very, very hard alongside me to find additional resources for the Joint Office, and I want to thank Mark Jolin for his excellent leadership of that Joint Office, and Christian, you and your team over at the county have done an outstanding job, and certainly Director Krieger, you continue to do fine work with regard to our efforts on these IGAs. I will simply put out the cautionary note that has been put out there several times with regard to the sustainability of this budget. It is not sustainable. I want to be very clear and on the record. The work that the Joint Office does is critically important. As the point-in-time count showed on Monday, we're actually making good progress. We've not solved the problem, but it is at least encouraging that here in Portland and Multnomah County, we have been able to reduce the number of unsheltered homeless on the streets. That counters the narrative that's being seen in Alameda County, LA County, King County, the greater Seattle area. So there is some good news here. There was certainly some bad news as well. We saw people with self-identified disabilities going up markedly. And while we will get the disaggregated data later, we are all supposing that there are increased self-reporting of both addiction and mental health issues related to those who find themselves in the situation of homelessness. And in addition, the number of chronically homeless also went up. So lots of work to do, but we need to redouble our efforts working with the county and the other partners in the Joint Office or at the A Home for Everyone Coalition to find a path to sustainable funding going forward. Because as everybody knows, and as our budget office has repeatedly admonished us, the funds we've put in this year hang a lot of hope on a continued growth cycle in the economy and a heavy reliance on one-time only funding. That is not sustainable. But this year, that's not the problem. Aye, ordinance is adopted. Next item, please. Don't go far.
Item 734, authorize 10 subrecipient contracts totaling $3,386,865 for services in support of providing affordable housing.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Kirk Krieger, Housing Director. These are legacy relationships that we have with a variety of nonprofit providers. They are extended for an additional year. And Kim McCarty is here to answer any particular questions you might have about any specific vendors or service providers.
So if I could, just for the record, I'd like to read in the organizations that are our partners here. From time to time, people wonder, do we actually work with or reach out to communities of color or underserved populations? The contracts here are related to NEA, the Portland Community Reinvestment Initiative, PCRI, the Community Energy Product, Unlimited Choices, Inc., which works on disability access issues, REACH Community Development Corporation, which focuses on low-income elderly and disabled homeowners, the Latino Network, the Community Alliance of Tenants, Legal Aid Services of Oregon, Impact Northwest, So these are all very good, strong partners for us, and they work predominantly in communities that are traditionally viewed as underserved in these areas. I'm really proud of the fact that the city continues to take a leadership role working with these community partners. Any further questions, colleagues? Any public testimony?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Fish?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for taking the time to read that, Mayor. It's important for people to know the kinds of things and the good things that is being done with taxpayers' money. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, please.
735, authorize funding in an amount not to exceed $9,700,000 to Stark Street Apartments Limited Partnership for the construction of a new 153-unit affordable housing development.
Good afternoon, Director
Hello.
Krieger. And you can take a little more time on this. We've caught
I think
up,
we're
and this is
joined,
an
I think we
important.
may have, is Stephanie Condor may be here by now, too. Although I
She
think-
is here. Yeah, sure
Excellent.
she is. Come on up.
And Christian is here as well from the chair's office. So this is a happy day. We, as you know, undertake annual notice of fund availability, what we call NOFAs. And those NOFAs materialize into real projects after all the real estate due diligence, all the design work, all the necessary funding has been accomplished. So Stephanie is Director of Development for Central City Concern, and the county is a major funder in this project. I would underscore the fact that in the 2016 NOFA, the county co-joined the city so that they were provided a site and working capital for multiple projects. The site itself was a county-owned property in northeast Portland. And as we originated the projects, we jointly underwrote those projects with the county. So they are a strong financial partner in this effort. So I'll let Stephanie speak for Central City Concern and describe the detail of this specific project.
Hi there, thank you. Stark Street Apartments is an apartment complex that we're proposing. It's going to consist of 153 units. The affordability will range between 30 and 60% MFI. That would mean that incomes would range from about $15,690 annually up to around $44,820. 91 one-bedrooms and 62 two-bedrooms. This project itself is delivering low-cost housing. It seeks to maximize units. We've been working on this low-cost construction model. At present, we anticipate the hard cost coming in at $134,000 per door, which is really competitive. The investment from the city and county will total $9.7 million, but on a per unit basis, that's $63,000 per unit. This housing will provide low barrier housing for people graduating out of transitional housing. As well, we've worked with the Davis Douglas School District. We've had several meetings out there. We've met with the Hazelwood Neighborhood Association, was invited to meet with the superintendent out there at David Douglas School District, was invited to further meet with their Title X representative, as well as attend board meetings, all of which have been well received. Title 10 or Chapter 10 representative is somebody that works with the families in the school district that are homeless or at poverty. And they're very excited for this project. They have, I think they said about 3% of their children are currently homeless out there, and this is much needed housing. We also are working with NARA as well. CCC has over 40 years of experience working with at-risk populations and homelessness, and we've come to realize that a roof is only part of what needs to occur in improving the long-term resiliency from homelessness, and this requires a collection of services. At Stark, our resident services will focus on housing stability, income advancement, connection to wellness services, and long-term life goals. The combination of these things increase long-term stability and resiliency from homelessness. As a note, we are also in pre-development for our East Side Campus project, which will be located kind of around the corner on 122nd and Burnside. Having this proximity will give them further adjacency to services connecting to wellness, employment access center, and other services that we provide. So we think this is well located for them. I also wanted to thank Portland Housing Bureau and the city for investing in this kind of needed housing. It's been excellent to work with them. They've helped us along the way in so many ways. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Christian?
Thank you, and Mayor Wheeler and City Councilors. I'm Christian Gaston from Multnomah County Chair's Office, and Mayor Wheeler, I want to honor your earlier suggestion to be succinct, but I think it's always worth taking a moment to celebrate the strong partnership between the City of Portland and Multnomah County and our commitment and shared vision to end homelessness and ensure that everybody in our city has a roof over their heads. Projects like these that make that possible, along with all the work that you're doing every day around tenant protections and making sure that there's building supply in the pipeline. So thank you for partnering, and we're happy to be here.
Christian, thank you. And I want to reiterate Chair Kafoury's strong engagement and involvement in this process. And I know that you've been leading the efforts on behalf of the Chair's office. And please don't take my desire for us to be quick for any less enthusiasm. This council's been in session for the better part of the last 9 hours. And so we're not done yet, so we're just being efficient. But I want to thank you. And there were some things I should have said up front that I neglected to do. In addition to the obvious, I want to thank you for the $9.73 million of Multnomah County funding that's going into this project. I want to acknowledge Commissioner Saltzman. The ball really started rolling under his leadership as the Housing Commissioner during the early stages of this, working in tandem with Chair Kafoury and others to make sure that this would come to fruition. It's 153 units, as Kurt said, 8 units serving households earning up to 30% of median family income, and obviously at high risk of becoming homelessness, particularly in this market. 40% of the units are family friendly, and I know that's something Commissioner Saltzman has certainly been talking about here on this council. 61 of the units are 2 bedrooms, 92 are 1 bedrooms, and as you mentioned, this is a model partnership. Multnomah County, Central City Concern, the Portland's Housing Bureau, the state's Housing and Healthcare Initiative, amongst others. You've landed not only Central City Concern as a key partner here, but Ankrum Moyson Architects as well, one of the great local architecture firms here. Colleagues always ask about MWESB participation. We're at over 27% is my understanding for this project, which is a true success. And when I think about the second chance rental opportunities that go into this for graduates of job training and recovery programs, as well as the focus on housing at-risk families from the David Douglas School District, this gets to some of the questions that were raised this morning about what are we specifically doing for lower income families on the east side of the Willamette River. And this, of course, is a tangible example of when we work with the county and other partners, we reach farther into East County and more effectively into the east side of the city and the county. So thank you for that.
Mayor, I have just 2 questions.
Commissioner Fish.
Kurt,
yes.
how have you addressed the setback issues to the north? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is not quite as
Okay.
tightly constrained site as the one you were dealing with previously.
So I'm looking at the PHB subsidy, which is a total of 9.7. What is the county's contribution?
It's 1.5 of the total, so
Mayor
9.7 in
may have
total.
been a little generous, but we're grateful for the contribution.
And it's worth mentioning that the total development cost of $29.2 million means that 9.7 is leveraging $2 for every $1 of public funds.
But the other thing I wanted to comment on is this has HIF money, right? Housing Investment Fund. And is this the first one we've done with this kind of contribution from HIF?
Well, I think we actually purchased the Parks Bureau site with HIF dollars late last year. So there was we have used some HIF dollars as we had it available.
And so this is the fund we created through dedicated money, then we bonded it, and it can be used in non-urban renewal districts. So this gives us a more flexible dollar, that's the key. Along with home, which is at risk, Multnomah County Home for Everyone funds, and then Home Consortium. So, well done, thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. So I have a question about the family-sized units. It said that 2 bedrooms is family-sized. Knowing the demographics of the David Douglas School District, that doesn't seem all that big. I mean, is it that they're big 2-bedroom? I mean, what's the square footage?
Well, I think, at Central City Concern, what we really were trying to focus on is maximizing units. What we're seeing, even in our transitional housing, our goal is to reduce homelessness and work with populations that really are underserved. So if we were to do bigger units, it would be more costs and you would get less units. So this way we thought we could serve more families. It's just a matter of maximizing the number of units that we can and trying to place as many 2-bedrooms as we can, but there's only so much you can do with, finite amount of money.
Well, certainly having 2 bedrooms is very helpful for parents who want a bit of privacy once in a while. But also, there's a lot of families that are doubled up. So obviously, it's a great project, and I'm very grateful that it's being done. I just would be careful about emphasizing the family size piece, because I think it's still obviously much better than being outside. And people will be very happy to be in those 2-bedroom units. We need to look at more ways to provide reasonable accommodations for larger families. Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions, colleagues? Is there any public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have one person signed up, Mary Sipe.
All right, why don't we hear from Mary?
The sole survivor. There were other people. I know everybody's anxious to end this day, but I think it's really important for people like Kurt and everybody to hear from someone who's actually benefiting from this type of program. This is so exciting. I've talked about affordable housing, and it's just, I couldn't be more excited about this. In the 80s and 90s, when I was the vice president of the board of directors of a private social service agency in Eugene that provided housing and shelter to homeless families, I never thought that I would be in a position, because I was making a lot of money at the time, that I would ever be living in affordable housing. And when I lost my job during the recession, and I lost my home, and I lost my pension, affordable housing saved me. And in fact, at your urging, I wrote an email and I copied all of you on a rather lengthy email to Kurt expressing my desire to get involved in these programs and some of my background and experience in this area. And like I say, I never thought when I was on that board of directors that I'd be living in affordable housing. As our economy continues in this situation that it's in, and people are underemployed, and the cost of education is so prohibited, we're going to have more and more people who do not make enough money during their career to set aside money for a 401k or any kind of retirement, and they're never going to be able to buy a home. And programs like this are looking to the future to help people that, through no fault of their own, cannot afford housing, and so I'm really excited to see this. I will say it's frustrating that the vocal citizens who keep coming up here and demanding to know what you're doing about housing the houseless aren't here to hear these last 4 agenda items. It's really frustrating, and
Mayor, can I say something?
Kudos.
In all, just speaking for
Fish.
myself, I actually find it less frustrating when they're not here.
Yeah,
But
I know.
I would just offer that.
That's true.
I'll offer that observation, so.
The irony is not
That's okay.
lost on us.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, I know. It's
Can I
a
just say,
double-edged
Mary,
sword.
if we could have you testify in almost every item, I think that would be a real improvement.
Well, thank you. But anyhow, it's I just can't say enough kudos. Yeah.
Mary,
I got
we're
yelled-
all still laughing up here and smiling.
I know,
the good news.
that's the great thing. Well, just, this will make you laugh. So when I came back from the lunch break for the afternoon session, as I'm walking down the street, I had a little bit of an encounter with Joe Walsh. And so I stood up, or as I'm walking down the street, he's yelling at me with the bullhorn. So, there's no escaping it. But thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
I
thank
can think
you.
of a couple ways.
And colleagues, any further questions? And did anybody here have anything else to add before we call the roll? Very good. Please call the roll.
Fish?
Great project. We have a wonderful partnership with Central City Concern. It's in a part of the city that desperately needs affordable housing. And one thing that I've learned over the years is that we often get complaints from people out in these neighborhood associations about the quality of the affordable housing, but almost invariably they're referring to the private market housing, which is very poorly constructed and often not very habitable. These kinds of developments actually are a net plus to the community. And they're beautifully designed and built buildings with nonprofit partners that know how to actually manage the buildings in a way that's humane and client-centered. So, and of course, the numbers speak for themselves in terms of who we're serving. So thank you, Dan. Thank you, Housing Bureau. I'm pleased to vote aye.
Saltzman?
Great project, great partnership between the county and the city and Central City Concern. Aye.
Udaly?
How can we do about 20 times more of these? Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for your work. This is 153 units in an area of town that needs them. I particularly like the partnership with David Douglas School District, so thank you very much for your good work. Aye.
Wheeler?
Well structured. Thank you. All right. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, last item.
736, adopt and authorize the submission of the action plan fiscal year 2017-2018 for the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Program to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon, Kurt Krieger, Housing Director, and with me is Kim McCarty, who administers the federal programs on behalf of the entire region. We receive these funds from HUD for Multnomah County and the city of Gresham, so we're the lead agency. And she has an update that's being distributed to the clerk for the council's information. This is required to be filed annually, and to make it timely, i.e. before July 1st, we filed the ordinance with last year's appropriation numbers because HUD had not yet given them to us until like last Thursday. Yeah. So the new numbers are provided to you for the record. There are some slight changes, nothing dramatic, and Kim is conversant in all the details.
And how many years does this cover, this particular action plan?
This is for 1 year, so this is the second annual action plan of the 5-year consolidated plan that started in 2016.
And since there's a reference to HOPWA, the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS program, is our submission limited to how we intend to spend our entitlement dollars, or does this anticipate any competitive grant money?
It's our entitlement.
Our entitlement money? And I assume we're continuing the partnership with Cascade AIDS?
Yes.
And just to clarify, this what we've just given is an additional exhibit, or do you want us
This
to move?
replaces the previous exhibit.
Do we need to move to do that amendment?
I believe we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I move to substitute.
Second.
Second.
So Commissioner Fritz moves to substitute, Commissioner Fish seconds. Any further discussion on the substitute? Call the roll on the substitute.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
All right, we're now discussing the substitute.
So Kurt, just a comment. It's 5 o'clock, we're all tired, and we're now going to act on our action plan for a fiscal year, and this is a multi-page document. This is a very big deal. This is sort of the roadmap for how we're going to spend, and I know that you get to this point after considerable community consultation and process. What's the next opportunity we have as a council to go a little maybe deeper into this process and help shape maybe the next 5-year vision. We have a new council, we have a new set of challenges, and we have obviously the new partnership with the county. Is there an opportunity for the council to become more engaged in this in the future?
Well, I think to the extent that you want to, that would be fine. It does constitute about 20% of the Housing Bureau's budget, so it's a big deal in that regard. It is, I would underscore the fact that because it's federal dollars, it comes with a lot of compliance requirements. I would say that half of our administrative burden within the Housing Bureau is dedicated to managing 20% of our money.
Yeah.
There's definitely a disconnect there. We will advocate for some regulatory relief, given every opportunity we can with the new
Block
administration.
grants with fewer strings and
Right,
same amount of
fewer
money.
strings, definitely. And this is a budget that is built in consultation with Multnomah County and the city of Gresham. So we are mindful that we have community partners in this effort. But I think perhaps Kim could reflect a little bit on ways in which you could have, given your limited time available, an impact on that conversation with the community. We do know that, for example, the home and the CDBG program are slated for not renewal. The HUD secretary and the OMB director both proffered that as part of their 16% cut. So I do think that there could be some conversation with the community about what difference that would make to them as these funds flow directly to subrecipients, and that the council does not have the general fund revenue to replace that money with.
That's a great example. Now, the Congress has said that the president's budget is they're not going to pay
DOA,
much attention to it. So,
Yeah.
but to the extent we see some significant changes in federal funding, and to the extent that we begin to think about modifying our priorities locally, I would welcome a chance next year to bring the council in for a little scoping project. I know you do an outstanding job with consulting with our partners. But if we do see a big drop-off of federal funds, it's going to have ripple effects, and we're going to have to make some forced choices about how we invest the money. And I would encourage you to engage us early on in that conversation if we have the worst-case scenario.
Yeah, be very happy to. The first opportunity happens in the fall with our community need hearing.
Good, thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
So this item was supposed to be 30 minutes, and I appreciate that you're recognizing a certain amount of fatigue on the council. Is there somewhere that people in the public can go on your website to find out more about this project?
Yes, they can go to the the Portland Housing Bureau's website, and then specifically Consolidated Planning, and then there will be this year's annual action plan. The action plan priorities follow the priorities that were already set by the Housing Bureau and this council and the overall Housing Bureau's budget.
Thank you.
And I would encourage people to look at the action plan goals, the 16 through 20 action plan goals. I think it's on page 2 of this handout, it's a very succinct description of what the objectives are and how these streams of funding actually fit into the addressing of each of those objectives. So I thought that was a very helpful template.
Thank you.
In fact, I will probably tear it out and put it on my wall. It's very good. Thank you for that. Any further comments, questions, public testimony?
No one signed up.
No public testimony. Anybody else have anything else for the good of the order on this matter? Very good. Please call the roll.
Fish?
Kim, I know how much work goes into this and to preparing this document every year, and your role in helping to bring this about. So thank you very much. And let's keep our fingers crossed that the federal government doesn't decide to get out of the housing business, because that would be a shame. Aye.
Saltzman?
Thank you, Kim, for your good work. Aye.
Daly?
Thank you. I'm sorry this is coming at the end of a very long day, and I'm looking forward to learning more about this issue and participating in conversations going forward. Aye.
Fritz?
It is important when we have large amounts of money, especially newer money that's coming into the Housing Bureau. It's important for people to know specifically what is going to be done with it, and that there is a plan. It's not just whoever asks first. So thank you very much for that. I also want to thank all the city staff who are here and who've been here all day with us. And we recognize that you also have had, especially Carla, keeping track of everything going on. Really appreciated. Thank you. Aye.
Thank you very
Wheeler.
much.
I think this is a very good plan, and I think it's a great strategy to back the plan. And I'm sure we will be successful as a result. And I want to thank the Housing Bureau, and I want to thank you for your hard work, and all of our community partners, some of whom are represented here in the room, our county partners and others. As I look at these projects going forward, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, too. There's a lot of innovative, new ideas here, and I'm confident that we'll be successful in implementing those ideas. So with that, I will vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Carla, if I got this right, we have gotten through all of the items for today. Is that correct?
Correct.
Very good. So tomorrow, we have one time certain item at 2 p.m. I am excused, so Commissioner Udaley will be chairing that hearing. I will be in D.C. lobbying on behalf of the city. And so I'm sorry, I will not be able to join you for that hearing, but I will certainly be thinking about all of you. We are adjourned.